Kishore, you can start.
Good morning and welcome to the fourth day of Tamil Heritage Trust's Indology Festival 2022. Before we start the day's proceeding, I would like to give a brief introduction to Tamil Heritage Trust. Established in 2010, Tamil Heritage Trust has been doing a lot of work in the field of Indian heritage with an aim to improve the understanding, appreciation, celebration, and dissemination of various facets of India's cultural heritage. We do this through several means, through our monthly heritage talks that give a platform for both enthusiasts and experts to share their knowledge, their expertise on Indian heritage, through our thematic seminars called Pech Kacheri, where we do a deep dive into several aspects of heritage around a central theme, like for example, a Pallava art or a Orissa art or a Pandya art. Through our intense workshops, where we engage with the general public to help them improve their understanding of temple appreciation, museum appreciation, Pallava Grantham, Lipi, and so on. Through our annual site seminars that are heritage tours that are that help people who are traveling get a better understanding of the heritage sites that they're traveling. Through the award that we institute every year, the Tamil Heritage Trust Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award, that is meant to encourage individuals who do a lot of work in the field of Indian heritage. Through our program called Alamar Avai, where we work closely with teachers across Tamil Nadu and train them on Indian heritage so that they can disseminate this knowledge to their students, their children. This year, Tamil Heritage Trust is also co-hosting an award called V. Venkaya Epigraphy Award. We are co-hosting this along with Srimati Sunita Madhavan, who is a great granddaughter of Shri V. Venkaya. The award is meant to recognize individuals who have done excellent work in the field of epigraphy. Details are on our website, www.tamilheritage.in. The last date for submitting nominations is the 19th of June. So please go ahead and visit our website to understand more about this award. Our first Indology Festival was conducted in 2020. This was a week-long festival where we had several experts, academicians around the world come together and deliver lectures on various aspects of Indology, like prehistory, early history, Indian mathematics, temple architecture, and so on. So here we are, our second Indology Festival, which is celebrating the temple builders of medieval India. Now, we chose this topic because we believe that this is a phase in Indian history that is less represented or perhaps underrepresented in our academic books, in the history that we learn from our textbooks. So we thought we would invite experts from around India and have them deliver lectures on the various kingdoms, lesser known and well-known kingdoms who built these temples during the 8th to 13th century CE. The architectural treasures that they built and what we treasure today as our own rich cultural heritage. All our programs are available on YouTube. So this this festival we started on Thursday, the 2nd of June. We had Dr. Keshavan Velutad deliver the keynote address on the transition from the early historical period to this medieval period. Followed that, Dr. Chitra Madhavan spoke about the art of the imperial Cholas. On day 2, Friday, we had Sri Sitaraman speak about the later Pandyas and how their temples varied from the Pallavas and Cholas. Following that, Dr. Manjari Balerao spoke about the Gurjara Pratiharas and their monuments. Yesterday, Saturday, we had 4 lectures. To begin with, we had Dr. Kumud Kanikar speak about the Shilaharas and their temples that they built in the northern Konkan region. Following that, Dr. Sudeepa Ray Bandyopadhyay spoke about the Pala Sena dynasty and the architecture that they established in the eastern part of India, particularly in Bengal and Bihar. Last evening, Dr. Ajit Kumar delivered his lecture on the salient features of temple building in Kerala. And followed by that, Dr. Sushmita Sen from the University of Baroda spoke about the Solankis and their Maru Gurjara style temples and step wells that they built in the western part of India, predominantly in Gujarat. All our programs, including this Indology Festival, are available on YouTube. So if you have missed any of our lectures over the last 3 days, we highly encourage you to go ahead and visit YouTube, our channel, which is Tamil Heritage Trust. You can watch not just this videos, but also our previous monthly talks and Pecha Kacheris. You can click on the subscribe button for Tamil Heritage Trust if you wish to receive notification of our future events. So welcome to day 4 once again. Today we have 4 fascinating topics, 2 in the morning and 2 this evening. To begin the day's proceedings, we have Dr. Manoj Gundanna, who is going to deliver his lecture on the Hoysala architecture. A researcher on temple architecture, Dr. Manoj is an archaeologist by profession. He earned his MA and PhD degrees in ancient history and archaeology from Manasa Gangotri, University of Mysore. Currently a research associate with Marani Lakshmi Ammani Research Foundation, Bangalore. Dr. Manoj is also a resource person with the Archaeological Survey of India. He was awarded his PhD in 2009. His doctoral work has been published by Bharatiya Kala Prakashan, Delhi, under the title Temple Architecture of South India, Salem region. Dr. Manoj's research focuses on the study of ancient Dravidian temple architecture based on traditional agamas and Vastu Granthas, besides the study of sculptures and iconography based on ancient Sanskrit texts. He has presented more than 50 research papers, both in English and Kannada, at various seminars and symposia. He has delivered lectures on archaeology, music, and mythology in various institutions, religious organizations, and to students around the world. One of his books, Devalaya Vastu Vijnana, is a reference book on Dravidian temple architecture for postgraduate students of history and archaeology. Dr. Manoj's interests include Kannada and Sanskrit literature, inscription, and manuscripts. A multilinguist, he has several compositions in Sanskrit, Kannada, Telugu, and Tamil to his credit. Planet Prayers, a trilingual commentary on the Navagraha Kritis of Muthuswami Dikshitar, and Siddhi Vinayakam Sada Bhajeham, an exposition in English on Muthuswami Dikshitar Kritis on Lord Ganapati, are among his well-acclaimed books. I'd like to welcome Dr. Manoj Gundanna to deliver his lecture on Hoysala architecture.
Namaskaram.
You need anything? Yeah.
Namaskaram. Namaskaram to everybody. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, your presentation is not visible.
I thought, okay.
The screen briefly came up and then went away. Go to the share screen on Zoom window.
So the share screen is not getting highlighted here.
You can, if you do, if you are not, I think you are not on the Zoom screen at all. You can do a Alt tab screen to move to Zoom window. Then you would see the button share screen. Are you on the Zoom window?
Yes, I am on the Zoom window.
Can you see that green share screen button?
Yeah, share screen is there.
Just select
I
that.
clicked on it. The share is not getting highlighted.
By any chance, have you emailed your presentation to somebody so that we can share it?
I can email it now if you want.
Sure, sir. I will send you my.
Wait, I'll now email it to Sham. I just received a link from him, right?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. 1 minute.
Just give us a second.
Sir, I have mailed it.
Is it up? Yes, sir. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
got it?
continue.
I will just begin with the introduction of the history.
So the presentation has gone away again.
That was my screen, Badri.
Okay.
That was me sharing, the title of that was not Dr. Manoj's screen.
So
Shall I begin with the introduction of the history?
Yes, please go ahead.
But have you mailed the presentation?
Yeah, I mailed it. I just now mailed it.
You go ahead with the history. I will bring it up. Yeah.
I think you must have got it in your.
No, I will take care of it. You just start talking.
Okay. So, namaskaram to everybody. As it is known, Hoysalas were one of the renowned dynasties who ruled in the southern part of India, southern part of the Vindhya ranges. So, as all other dynasties, they also made an humble beginning as the feudatories of the then imperial Kalyana Chalukyas. Kalyana Chalukyas are also popularly known as the later Chalukyas. So the earliest known historic person from this dynasty through epigraphical sources is one king by name Nrupakama. And then we get another name, Vinayaditya. The gap between the dates of both these rulers is quite long. So we do not know if the earlier ruler ruled for such a long duration, or we do not have any inscriptions related to the rulers who ruled in between. So, however, the most important and the person who brought the Hoysala fame to an imperial status and to a very great political level was Vishnuvardhana. And his inscriptions give a genealogy about 2-3 generations, beginning from Vinayaditya, and then it comes on to his father, Yarayanga. And Vishnuvardhana was the second son of Yarayanga. So, earlier, as I said, they were all feudatories, and their origin, their place was a place named Sosevur or Angadi in the modern Shimoga district of Karnataka. In 980, Rajaraja Chola conquered the entire southern part of Karnataka, almost the entire southern part of Karnataka, and he had gone up to the modern district of Coorg. So till then, Rajaraja Chola had vanquished the places, and during Rajendra Chola period, they even went up to the Tungabhadra Delta, and they conquered a lot of regions from even like middle and northern parts of Karnataka. And there are many inscriptions of the Cholas in southern Karnataka which talk about their rule there. So from 980 till almost 1016, that is for a duration of about 135 years, the entire southern Karnataka was under the influence of the Chola rule. And as it is known, here the feudatories who ruled during that period as the feudatories of the imperial Cholas were the Gangas and Nolambas. So Gangas and Nolambas had their own style of architecture, which they patronized. Though they were feudatories, they had actually encouraged one particular way of architecture, which can be identified as the Ganga or the Nolamba architecture. And these, as they continued as feudatories, along with these two Nolamba and Ganga dynasties, even the imperial Cholas have contributed some temples, and for the temples, existing temples, renovation of temples and other things in the southern part of Karnataka. So, however, the rivalry was usually political, but when it came to the cultural aspects, there was no stop in temple building or temple activities even in the southern Karnataka part. Neither of the the parties of the opposite political parties, they interfered in the local cultural activities and the religious activities. Therefore, it continued as it was being in the earlier days also, and the Cholas patronized the temples. It was in and around, it was in 111, 1111.
Manoj, sorry. Can you send it to me? I will send you my.
I think I have your email ID, sir.
Yeah, it's dseshadri@gmail.com.
Yeah, not the link, the presentation.
No, it's okay. Whatever it is, you just send it to me to my email address. I'll just send you an email right away.
No, I have your email ID. I think it's a huge file, so you
that's okay. I can manage. I can manage it. As long as I get the link myself directly, I will. Yeah, I think I have gotten it. Yeah, thanks.
You got it?
Yeah, I will. No, it says access denied. Can you just resend it, please?
I'll resend it.
Or grant access.
Really sorry about this, but let's get the presentation up. Otherwise, it will be of, a lot of viewers will find it a little difficult.
Yes, sir. I have sent it. The other day when we were checking, it was so easy. I think it was on Friday.
No problem. Just give me 1 second, sir. I will pull it down and then. Yeah, I can access it. Just give me 1 minute. It'll be down and then I will. Yes, sir. Yeah, you can proceed.
Okay. So it was in 1111, Vishwanath ascended the throne, and it was he who brought the entire Hoysala fame to the limelight. So, and he started expanding his kingdom down southwards, and it was during his period when the Cholas were completely driven out of the southern part of Karnataka, and he followed them up to the Salem and Coimbatore districts of modern Tamil Nadu. So it was by 1117, Vishwanath had conquered the entire southern Karnataka region with some parts of northwestern Tamil Nadu and modern day Andhra Pradesh, parts of Andhra Pradesh. So by then, to establish this victory of his, to celebrate the victory, he builds 5 temples, beginning from the Chilvanarayana temple in Melkote, then the Chanakeshwar temple at Belur, then we have Naminarayana temple at Tondanur, and there are 2 more temples, one in Talakadu, that is Kirtinarayana, and the another one is Belavadi, that is Vijayanarayana. So these 5 temples he constructed, and from this time onwards, we can see the the emergence of what we recognize as the Hoysala architecture, and that became the popular style from that period onwards, when all the rulers of the dynasty started adopting. So during the rule of Vishnuvardhana, he had some amount of respect and reverence for the Kalyani Chalukyan emperor Vikramaditya VI. So he did not even attempt to cross the Tungabhadra or to extend his kingdom northwards. So what happens many a times, we get inscriptions where the mention of both the Hoysala rulers and the Kalyana Chalukya rulers are found in the same inscriptions, and the overlapping of the period and all these things happen in the Hoysala region. During 1127, Vikramaditya VI dies, and it is after that the later Hoysala successors, they extend their kingdom even northwards. So the glory of establishing an imperial Hoysala power, and the ruler who first called himself the Sarvabhauma Chakravarti was Ballala II, the grandson of Vishnuvardhana, and he takes the extends the kingdom, Hoysala kingdom, up to the Tungabhadra in the north, and he even crosses the Tungabhadra river. So majority of the Kalyana Chalukya area, southern part of Kalyana Chalukya kingdom, comes under the Hoysala rule. Even in the south, they extend their kingdom almost up to the modern districts of Tiruchirappalli, and there was one short period when they extended their kingdom even up to Rameswaram. That was a short duration. By the mid 12th and 13th centuries, rather the late 12th century, late 11th century and early 20th century, late 12th century and early 13th century, we see that the Cholas and Pandyas had politically weakened, and by then the Hoysalas had established matrimonial relationship with the Cholas, and they now had a second capital in the called as Vikramapura, which is in Trichy now, very near to Trichy in Samaypuram, and they started ruling the southern regions, and they were always busy interfering the politics of the Cholas and Pandyas, also balancing the rule and all those things. And it was during this period that they also constructed many temples in those regions, but they did not fall under the Hoysala style, which we find in the southern Karnataka region. So it was during Veerasomeshwara period. Veerasomeshwara was the son of Narasimha II, and his mother was also a Chola princess, and he also marries a Chola princess. That is his uncle's daughter he marries, and therefore the affiliation towards the Chola country and the Chola regions becomes stronger. And it was during the period of Veerasomeshwara, the Airavateshwara temple at Dharasuram was constructed by Rajaraja III. And that's why we find a lot of, the influence of intricacy of Hoysalas and other features in that temple also, in the Airavateshwara temple of Dharasuram. And it was in 1232, during the rule of Someshwara, the Hoysala kingdom was divided into 2 parts. The northern territories of the Hoysala kingdom, with Dwarasamudra or the modern Halebid as its capital, was ruled by Narasimha, Narasimha III, that is Veerasomeshwara's elder son Narasimha III, and the southern parts with Vikramapura as its capital was ruled by Ramanath Deva. Another interesting feature in the dynasty of Hoysalas is the rule of the Hoysala Empire emperors usually was longer when compared to the other dynasties. There are some rulers who have ruled up to 60 years, 40 years, 30 years. So what happens many a times, as if the rule extends for 60 years, we can observe the son and the grandson of the ruler also have participated in a lot of political and other cultural activities of that particular region. So therefore, in 1232, the Hoysala empire gets divided and Ramnath Deva gets control over the southern part. What happens by 1257 or so, Ramnath Deva loses some of the southern parts of the Hoysala kingdom to the Cholas. So then there is a clash between the brothers, and it was during the rule of Ballala III, that is the son of Narasimha III, who he reunites the entire Hoysala kingdom in 1297 AD. So by 1297, we see that the Hoysala dynasty gets reunites again. And Vishwanath Deva, the son of Ramanath Deva, had a very insignificant rule of 2 years. And after that, it is Ballala III who manages the entire Hoysala kingdom. And by then, we know that the invasions of Malik Kafur and other Muslim invaders started, and the empire was in very great danger. And northern parts, the Sevanas, had completely been perished by then. And it was in somewhere in 1340, we get the last reference of the Hoysala ruler Ballala IV, that is the son of Ballala III. And after that, political career of the Hoysalas is not known through any of the epigraphs. It was somewhere around that period. Vijayanagara also was established. And that's many of the historians have a very strong opinion that Ballala III and Ballala IV, or either of the one, mostly Ballala IV, was present, and he guided Harihara and Bukkadeva in the establishment of Vijayanagara kingdom also, because as a lot of the kingdoms had been fragmented by then, and they needed to consolidate it again. So there is some role played by the last emperors of the Hoysala dynasty when it comes to the establishment of Vijayanagara period or kingdom also. So this is a very brief history of Hoysala rule, and anybody interested to know it deeper, they can go through books by Settar and other professors. Dr. S. Settar has written 2 volumes of book on Hoysalas. So you get a lot of sources. So this is about the Hoysala history. And now I will describe the architecture part of Hoysalas. Now, usually, Hoysala architect.
If you want me to change the slide, just tell me. I will change it to the next slide.
Okay. I'll just give a very brief introduction.
No problem. I mean, I'm merely saying whenever a slide has to change, just shout out. Thanks.
So, how much of time do I have now?
You have a time. You have about close to an hour.
Close to an hour. Is it okay? Okay. So, I'll just briefly tell about the popular belief about the Hoysala architecture, and then give the parallel opinions about this thing. So usually everybody feels that Hoysala architecture is always, they constructed all their temples with the medium of soapstone. And second thing is, all the temples were very, very intricately carved, and they were embellished with the pillars and sculptures and all those things. And all the Hoysala temples are of Vesara style, and the temples of Hoysalas are all star-shaped plan. So these are all the popular notions. Can we go to the next slide? So, but all these arguments, they are not false, but we have to understand that they are partially correct. There is more truth about the Hoysala architecture. So Hoysala architecture, it is not something, any architecture for that matter, may it be Pallava, may it be Chola or Badami Chalukya, it applies to every school of architecture, that something cannot be born out of nothing. It's something cannot, overnight there will not be a change, or you cannot just identify something like that. But Hoysalas, they continued the architectural style which was popularized by the Kalyana Chalukya in the Karnataka belt. The geographical location of Kalyana Chalukyas was more on the northern side of the southern part of India. Therefore, naturally, we find that the relationship, maybe political or cultural relationship with the Kalinga and the Maharashtra region, modern day Maharashtra region, the Pratiharas, Gurjar Pratiharas, and other dynasties has helped them to build a new style of temple building. So, which was almost, as I said, it was a culmination of both the Dravida and the Nagara styles. It was like the basic elements were Dravida. When it came to the plan or the elevation of the temple, the basics were all Dravida. But when it came to the decorative aspects, we find a lot of Nagara influence in that. And there are many inscriptions of Kalyana Chalukyas and even Hoysalas which mention that the sculptors were very proficient in building temples of various styles like Bhumija, and they built temples of Dramila style. Dramila is the term used for Dravida. And then they also mention about the Vesara style and the Nagara style. So like that, there are varieties of temple styles which those architects were very proficient of. So therefore, all these temples were not built of soapstone. All these temples did not have a star-shaped plan, and all these temples were not Vesara. So we will observe one by one the features of Hoysala temple architecture and then try to understand what they were basically. So in the plan of the temple, Hoysalas, as I said, it was a continuation of the Kalyana Chalukya tradition, but Hoysalas excelled in it. So the concept of the Kuta Vimana was popularized by the Hoysalas. So usually Kuta is reference to the Garbhagriha, the Vimana part of the temple. Now, for people who may need, Vimana is the nucleus of the temple, that is the outer portion of the Garbhagriha is referred to as the Vimana. So if a temple possesses one Vimana, it is called Ekakota. And if the number increases, it is referred to those numbers. We get only up to Panchakutas. There are rare references of Trikota temples in Kalyana Chalukyas, but the Hoysalas popularized the Trikota temples. You get innumerable temples of Hoysalas, which are of this Trikota order. Here, I would just like to mention one thing. Usually, not many people know that the Hoysalas were also very great builders. From inscriptions, we can get to know that approximately about 2,000 odd temples were built by the Hoysalas. Of them, about 1,200 to 1,300 temples belong to the Shaiva cult. There are 600 or 700 temples of the Vaishnava cult. And there are 300 temples of Jaina, Jaina cult, and a few other temples like Shakta, and we have some Bhairava, Kapal, and all those minor cults also we do find. So overall, there are more than about 2,000 temples, and many of those temples are found in a dilapidated condition. And the beauty is there are some temples which are in a dilapidated condition we can identify as Hoysala, but they do not have inscriptions. And there are many inscriptions mentioning the existence of the temples, but they are not present today. The temple themselves have completely disappeared. So if we try to make a statistical record of these temples, we can see that the Hoysalas were also equally great builders. They have built more than 2,000 and odd temples during their, during the peak of their rule, and it continued even during the later part of the Hoysala rule. So this Ekakota Vimana, Dvikota Vimana, Trikuta Vimana, Chatushkuta Vimana, and the Panchakuta Vimanas were the 5 popular styles. I'm talking about the plan of the temple structure. So the temple plan usually had, can we go to the next slide? So the temple plan usually used to have a Garbhagriha, an Antarala, a Guda Mantapa, and a Mahamantapa, and other mantapas were all very optional. So these three were basically the basic essential parts of a temple. So this, what happens in the modern usage by many of the scholars, they use this, they call this part as the Shukanasi, and this part is usually called as the Navaranga. But the texts don't mention these two terms. The Shastric Vastu Granthas, they don't mention these two terms. And this is called as an Antarala, and this is a Gudha Mantapa. But why is it called a Shukanasi? Is because this chamber comes directly under the Shukanasa of the Prasada or the Shikara of the Garbhagriha. Therefore, it is called as Shukanasi and Navaranga. But there are references of both these terms, Shukanasi and Navaranga, in the inscriptions of the Hoysalas. Therefore, we can conclude, but by the period of the Hoysalas itself, the common terms for these two halls were Shukanasi and the Navaranga, because popularly the people or these architects used these terms. But we do not find the mention of Shukanasi as an antechamber in the Vastu Granthas. Likewise, we also do not find the mention of Navaranga in the forum. We find it. There is a very subtle explanation of why it is called as a Navaranga, because they say that the hall can be divided into 9 equal bays. But I somehow personally feel it is a very not a very logical explanation to give. But however, from further studies, I will see if it can be clarified. But however, as of now, the popular terms used are the Shukanasi and Navaranga, which are not totally wrong, but again, it doesn't give the complete picture of what it has to be. So this is an example of an Ekakota temple. The previous slide, we saw the structure, and this is the ground plan. Can we go to the next slide? So this is a Dvikota temple. Dvikota temple used to have 2 Garbhagrihas. And on plan, can we go to the next slide? See, there are various kinds of Dvikotas. The Dvikotas could be, like one Garbhagriha facing the east and the other Garbhagriha facing the north. There could be opposite Garbhagrihas, as we see in this particular plan. See, there are 2 Garbhagrihas opposite to each other. And there could also be, a Garbhagriha which was side by side, that is next to each other, like what we find in the Heyday temple. So the Dvikota temple used to have 3 or 4 varieties of plans based on the Garbhagriha, the placement of the Garbhagriha. Can we go to the next slide? So this is a Trikuta Vimana. This is one of the most popular temples. See what happens, though there are innumerable temples built by Hoysalas, there are 3-4 temples which are very popular, as they have been recognized as World Heritage Sites and they are recognized by UNESCO. Many scholars have worked on it. So these 3 sites are Belur, Halebeed and Somanathpura. Belur and Halebeed were the capital cities of the Hoysalas. They were both the capital seats. But Somanathpura, though it was not a capital seat, it was an Agrahara. But the temple is very renowned and popular for its beauty and elegance and the embellishment of sculptural art and other things. So this Somanathpura is a temple which is of the Trikuta order, where we find 3 Garbhagrihas. Next. Next slide.
Hello. Manoj, you can continue.
Can you move to the next slide? Any difficulty? Yeah. So see, this is the standard Trikuta plan. So we cannot find any change or option in the Trikuta plan, because now this is also a method how to recognize if a temple is Ekakota, Dvikota or Trikuta. Now there may be a complex with multiple shrines. Again, there may be a series of temples built, but they are all not considered as Dvikota or Trikuta. There will be many twin temples. For example, if you take Bhoganandeshwara temple of Nandi, which was built by Nolambas, They are twin temples, but they are not Dvikuta. So how do we recognize if a structure is Dvikuta or Trikuta is when the Garbhagrihas are multiple, while the Navaranga is one. So if there are multiple Garbhagrihas opening from one Navaranga, then we have to identify as a Dvikuta, Trikuta, or Chatushkuta temple. So this is how we have to identify the plan. So almost all the Trikuta temples had a similar plan because you know, a Navaranga will have 4 walls and one entrance is essential. Therefore, only other 3 walls are left as an option to build the respective Garbhagrihas. Even in Trikutas, this particular example doesn't have, all the 3 Garbhagrihas do not have a Shukanasi. Whereas there are temples with Trikuta temples with 3 independent Shukanasis also. That was left to the sorry. So this is a Trikuta Vimana. Next slide. This is the solitary example of a Chatushkuta Vimana of the Hoysala order. We have only one example. It was built during the period of Vishnuvardhana. It was built by one merchant. So another thing we have to observe is, I think it can be applied in general also. Always the builders of temple need not be royal personages or the kings or emperors themselves. Everybody of the society who could afford to build a temple participated in the activity of temple building. So this is the Mahalakshmi temple built by a merchant, and he wanted to make this place as a Dakshina Kollapura. Therefore, he has built this Mahalakshmi temple. It's a Shakta temple and it has 4 Garbhagrihas. Next slide. See, this is the plan of the Chatushkuta Vimana. Now here, this is a regular Trikuta structure where we find, you know, 3 Garbhagrihas opening from the common Navaranga, and we can also see that all the 3 Garbhagrihas have separate Shukanasas. Now, as however you are building a Chatushkuta, you needed to access, entry into the temple. Therefore, they have built 2 entrances in the extended part of the Navaranga, and this is a common structure. Here we find this as a Garbhagriha and an Arthamantapa. This is structurally a very beautiful temple, a very beautiful Shakta temple, which the researchers on temple architecture or people who are interested in temple architecture must visit this temple. It is near to Halebedu, very near to Halebedu. So this is a solitary example of the Chatushkuta Vimana of Hoysala period. Next one. Next slide. This is a Panchakuta Vimana. Here we see that all the 5 Garbhagrihas are open to one Navaranga and they have independent. Next slide, please. See, here it is clear. Now, all the 5 Garbhagrihas are open to one elongated Navaranga and there are 2 entrances, and all the Garbhagrihas have an independent Shukanasi. So this is about the temple plan. Actually, we find some dilapidated structures. For example, in Somanathpura, we have a dilapidated Panchakuta structure where the Garbhagrihas are built in a row. Probably as a structural necessity, the Panchakutas were usually built in a row because you cannot have all the Garbhagrihas and a direction circuit. It would have been very difficult. Therefore, the Panchakutas are built in a row. Further excavations may throw light upon other such examples also. Next slide. Now, coming to the styles of what the Hoysalas built. As I said, the inscriptions, even an inscription from Dottagattavalli just mentions some varieties of temples at the end of the inscription, like Garuda, Swastika, and all these terms, which are the Swastika, Nandyavarta, Garuda, and all these terms are found mentioned in the inscriptions, and we can confirm that these were the temple styles to the Vastu Granthas like Mayamata and other structures. So basically, as I said, what Hoysalas built was also a Dravida Vimana. It was only in the decoration and the presentation, as the medium was a softer medium, they could, do intricate carving, and the indentations were more. The indentations was because both for as a structural necessity, as well as, they could afford to do it both ways. There were more indentations. That's why we do not find very plain walls. There are the more indentations, the contour of the plan. Now, this is a rather regular Dravida Vimana, again from Tungabhadra Temple. We can see the Shatvargas of the Dravida structures. That is the Adhisthana, the Bitti part, we have the Prastara. Then here, from here onwards, it is the Talas and Prasada. Then we have Griva, Shikhara, and the Stupi. So all these, and see, the Hoysalas invariably built even the stupi out of stone. They did not install a metal kalasha or something in the pinnacle. Invariably, the stupa was also made of stone in the Hoysala style. So this is a regular Dravida Vimana, and there are innumerable temples with this style. Now here we have to observe the contour of the plan. We can see that there are indentations in the curve. That is, the projections and recessions were more. Therefore, it gives us an idea as if it's a plan which is not, which doesn't have, like right angles at the termination of the contour. So that is how we feel, but it is not so. Next slide. See, here we can understand the varieties of the Dravida and the stylite plans used by the Hoysala architects. Here, if you observe, see, as I said, the contour, the Vinyasa Sutra, as it is called in the text, it has right angles and it's a straight line. You don't have. So how to identify the star shape is, wherever we find an acute angle in the contour, then it becomes a star-shaped structure. So here, even in the star-shaped structure, this is a regular star-shaped structure. Probably, as the Kannada rulers had a relationship with the Orison rulers from the earlier times, they must have adopted this style from the Orison belt, because you have a lot of stylite temples built by the Orison rulers also. Even in Orissa, we find a lot of stylite planned temples. That is such kind. And it is also surprising, the texts like Mayamata and Manasara, they give the shapes like Chaturashra, Ayata, Gajaprashta, Vritta, and all those things we find, even Vrittayata. But there is no mention of this particular kind of plan, that is a Garbhagriha plan of Nakshatrakara. We do not find it in the texts, at least the texts like Mayamata, Manasara, Shilparatna, Kashyap Shilpa, and all those texts, we do not find the mention. And the term stylite is also a term which was introduced and used by the British scholars. I don't know if there may be some texts like Aparajita Pruchar, some other texts which may give a name for this kind of plan. I have not gone through the text, so I cannot tell anything with conformity with regards to the name. So this, the English term stylite plan is now being translated as Nakshatrakara in the vernacular system. So therefore, but however, this system was there. It was a known popular style. So therefore, not all the temples of Hoysalas possessed a stylite plan. Next slide, please. See, this is how we see the Nakshatrakara in the contour. Here you can see that not all these are placed in right angles. They are tilted a bit. So this angle may be of 90 degree, but it is not having a very straight end. It's not Chaturashra as it can be seen. Next slide. See, this is how they used to achieve this Nakshatrakara. This is from a Kapishila in a place called Amritapura. So in Amritapura, Kapishila is a stone which is placed on the compound of the temple. So it is called as a Kapishila. This Shila has a design which shows how the stylite plan can be achieved by rotating a Chaturashra. So by rotating a Chaturashra, we can achieve this kind of stylite plan. Next slide, please. Now, coming to the Adhishtanas of the Hoysala temples, as I mentioned, the basic forms of the temple Adhishtanas of the Hoysala style was all as per the descriptions we find in texts like Mayamata and others. Here I would like to make one more clarification. The division of this Nagara and Dravida, which we are contemporarily using, like Dravida style and Nagara style, it is again backed by the opinions of British scholars or Europeans. I don't mean to say that they are wrong or it is wrong. What happens? No texts like the texts like Mayamata or Manasara or such texts, Kashyap Shilpa, they do not mention that this text belongs to a Dravida school of architecture. So we do not find this connotation found in any of the texts. They do not claim themselves to be Dravida or Nagara. But the mention of Dravida and Nagara is seen in the text. Sometimes deciphering them is also a bit difficult. But we can, by observation, we can see that there has been one set of building rules and principles followed in the regions above Godavari and below Godavari. And there is a lot of, again, give and take on both the sides. We have adopted many styles from their side, and they have taken many of our regional styles also. So both these things we see. So therefore, here when I'm mentioning it is Dravida, we have to understand like what the texts like Mayamata and others mention. So the Adhisthana is usually Pratibandha Adhisthana is found in huge numbers. This is a typical Pratibandha Adhisthana of the Hoysala style. As I said, the regular Dravida temples like the Chola temples or Pallava temples, we find all these adjuncts of the Adhisthana are very, very identifiable, very bulky in their form. So they are not very slender, they are not over ornated. So we can identify it very easily. But in Hoysala, what happens? Each and every adjunct gets some kind or the other kind of decoration or a stylized form of presentation. Now Kumuda for example, usually we have Tripatta Kumuda or Vritta Kumuda, which is a circular or three-faced, and we can identify. But Hoysala, this is a Tripatta Kumuda, not identifiable with the other Chola kind of Tripatta Kumudas. They have stylized it. They have made the face of the Tripatta more slender. So this is their way of presenting the Tripatta Kumuda. Next slide. This is a very rare kind of Adhisthana which we find, and it is Kalachabandha Adhisthana. So Kalachabandha Adhisthana, say Manasaran text mention about this Adhisthana, where it says the Adhisthana must possess a Kalasha below the Kapota and between two Kapotas. So here we find there is one Kapota here and other Kapota above, and between we have a Kumbha depiction. So therefore, this is a rare instance of Kalashabandha Adhisthana, but it was used in the Hoysala temples. We get many examples. Next slide. So now, apart from the regular Adhishtanas with the Jagati, Kumuda, Tripatta Kumuda, Upana, Kapota or Mahapatti, these are all the regular Adhishtanas described in the texts. But Hoysalas had developed their own kind of Adhishtanas, which were usually the paneled Adhishtanas. So they are Salankrita Pattikas, and they were profusely decorated. So whenever we find a profuse decoration in the Adhisthana, we can see that Adhisthana is invariably of the Pattika style, Pattika order. It had panels, and we can try to identify and relate it to some adjuncts. For example, we can call this as the Jagati of the Adhisthana because Upana is very clear. So this is Jagati, but again we have to call all these as Pattis only. So the topmost we can identify something as near to Kapota, but however, they are all paneled Adhishtanas. They are all Pattika Adhishtanas. And if there is not much decoration, we can find this Adhisthana was of the regular order. Next slide. So this Pattika Adhishtanas, where we find this, the Salankrita Adhishtanas, which detailed carving, we find that a lot of narrative panels were carved in the Pattikas of the Adhisthana. This was to facilitate the adults to teach youngsters our Puranas and Itihasas. I usually don't like to call them as mythology. So various incidents from Itihasas, that is Ramayana and Mahabharata, Bhagavad Purana and other texts, we find they were carved only in the Adhisthana panels, because that would facilitate, it would be in a height of 2.5 feet. So it would be a comfortable vision for the youngsters as well as the elders. And this was the visual medium of teaching in those days. This is the scene of Chakravyuha from Mahabharata. The next slide, please. Now, coming to the Bitti part of Hoysala temples. As I mentioned in the earlier part of my presentation, not all temples of Hoysalas were richly carved or richly embellished. See, this is a very austere and serene temple. What happens when they had to build Jaina temples? Jainism, which was something against pomp and show. They did not like much of grandeur. Probably the Jinnanathapura temple is the only Hoysala temple of the Jaina order which has a lot of sculptural embellishment on the outer walls. Otherwise, invariably the Jaina temples, this is the Vijayaparshanatha temple near Halebid. So invariably the Jaina temples of the Hoysalas was very, very, very serene and austere. They were not very grand. They had the basic essential parts of decorations the Bitti must have according to the text. So this is the very non-ornate Bitti of the Hoysala style. Next. So then again, we see that the Bitti of the Chola temples were invariably decorated with a lot of architectural members like Bittipadas, Toranas, Koshtas, Devakoshtas, Kumbhapanjaras, and all these things were the regular decorations, were all architectural part. Even Hoysalas, the Badami Chalukyas had the same tradition of embellishing the outer walls with architectural decoration motifs like Toranas and Bittipadas and other things. We see the same tradition continued by the Hoysalas also. And again, as I mentioned, the decoration is very stylized, very delicate, very crisp, not the not the bulky kind of presentation. That's what we find. The Bittipadas are all very slender. Next slide. So this is the regal ornate temple of Hoysalas, where we find a lot of sculptural embellishments. And many a times, if the structure was huge, large, and the Bitti had to be tall for structural necessity, as they used to soap stone, they had this. They had to see to that the structure may sustain the weight of the wall. Therefore, they divided the Bitti into two parts as Adho Bitti and the Urdhva Janga and Adho Janga. So Adho Janga is the lower part, Urdhva Janga is upper part. This tradition we see it continued during the Vijayanagara and Nayaka period, where the Mahadwaras of the temple usually used to have two levels of Bittis as Urdhva Janga and Adho Janga. So they used to decorate, and many of the times the Urdhva Janga, as it wouldn't be very clearly visible, it was less ornate, and the sculptures were also less compared to the Adho Janga. But Adho Janga housed a gallery of sculptures from all themes, from mythological tableau, episodes, or independent sculptures. All these were used by the Hoysala sculptors. Next slide, please. So these are some of the popular sculptures which we repeatedly find in the Hoysala sculptures. That is Ravana lifting the Kailasa and Arjuna aiming at the Matsyantra. So these are all, like many a times, these sculptures were not just for the decorative purpose. They had to convey some kind of message for the viewers, to people who looked at it, and it had to be very inspiring. So it creates, a kind of determination when it comes to taking up any project or any work by even common individuals. That's why the sculptures which were given importance, if you observe, they were not always very religious. They did not have a very always the sanctified representation. Many a times there were sculptures which conveyed a lot of messages. They were very inspiring to make people more active. Next slide. So this is the Stamba Panjara, which is a parallel to the Kumbha Panjara, which was introduced by the late Cholas. Even the early Cholas, we do not find usage of Kumbha Panjara, but by Rajaraja period itself, we find the emergence of Kumbha Panjara. And this is a parallel decoration called as the Stamba Panjara. So in text, there is a mention called Stamba Kumbha Latha. We can find the reference. And here we find a pillaret or a Vittipada, which is topped by a decoration resembling a Panjara. So that is why it is called as a Stamba Panjara. Next. So this is the regular Torana of the Hoysala order. See, Torana usually is a decorative motif which will have two Bittipadas and it will have a canopy about it. We can find this such Toranas in Chola temples also, where there will be two Bittipadas above which are the Nakulapadas many a times, above which we find a Shala Shikara or a Kuta Shikara or some such thing. Even Panjara Shikaras are found. So this is a Torana of the Hoysala style. Here what happens, instead of Shala, Kuta, Panjara, the regular Dravidian adjuncts or the parts, they have used, the Nagara kind of Shikaras as decoration. Next. So this is another, this is where Hoysala sculptors as well as the Kalyan Chalukya sculptors have shown their, their uniqueness by mixing both the Jalaka and the Stamba Panjaras together, so that it will be utilitarian as well as decorative. These are all some of the, the Shilpi Swatantriya or the Chaturata, as we call, of the Shilpi in the presentation of the decorative motifs. Next. So we come to the Prastara part of Hoysala temples. As I said, see, Prastara is also again very stylized, but it is as we find in other regular temples also. It is of the Dravidian order. See, we find that it will have a kapota. Below the kapota we have a uttara and a valabhi. Then the kapota. Above the kapota we have an hara. So hara usually consists of Shala, Kuta and Panjara. So Shala will have an elongated plan. That is a plan which is rectangle. And the Kutas will have Chaturashra or square plan. And in between these Shalas and Kutas, we will find Panjaras, which will have, which will resemble a Mahanasi, which will have an upside plan. So we find that the Shala, Kuta, Panjaras are implemented by Hoysalas also, but again, they are very much stylized. So this is a Shala in the Prastara of the Hoysala order. Next. So now, this is a very unique and special contribution of Hoysalas. As I said, it was known, the adoption of a Puthali or Salabanjika as a decorative motif can be seen from the Sanchi Stupa period itself. And there are some texts which mention various kinds.
Please continue. Please continue.
Can I continue or should I
go back? Continue. Please continue.
Oh, okay. So they are called as Madanika sculptures. Madanika is just a name given to them by the later scholars. And these are usually referred as Salabanjikas and Puttalis. Though they were known and they have been seen from the earliest times, the Hoysalas adopted this Salabanjika sculptures as the decorative part of the Potika. So a variety of Chitra Potika. Potikas are the corbels built above the pillars. And apart from the pillars, they started also decorating the outer walls of the upper part of the outer walls with these Salabanjika sculptures. So actually there are some texts, the granthas, which give references of sculptures, how they can be carved as looking into a mirror or having a parrot, Shukabhashini and all those things. And such Salabanjikas are described, and we find that Hoysalas have not, left a single opportunity to exploit this variety of decoration. This is one of the most major contributions of the Hoysalas to the sculptural as well as the architectural part of the temple, because they are actually architectural decorations in the form of a sculpture. So this is one of the major contributions of the Hoysalas. Next slide, please. So coming to the prasadas, as I mentioned, the prasadas of the Hoysalas are also the same as mentioned in the texts, but they were stylized. Now, what we do not find in the regular the Dravida texts and the description is the presence of this Shukanasa. Hoysalas adopted this and introduced this Shukanasa like Kalyani Chalukyas, and they used it greatly. Shukanasa was a projection from the prasada, and usually the vestibule or the antarala would come below this part. Now we can find that if we identify this prasada, the variety of prasada based on Mayamata, we can call it as a Tritala Swastika. See, we find there should be Chatushala, Chatushkuta and Ashtapanjaras in each level. So we find a Shala, so we can understand that all other sides will have one. And there are kotas in the corners, we can see that, and Panjaras in between. So, but the presentation we can see it is very much stylized. Even the Shalas has some projections. So this is the Tritala Swastika Prasada of the Hoysala order. Next slide. Mahanasis of the Shukanasa was another excellence in the Hoysala architecture. Many a times, as in the case of this temple, also the Amriteshwara temple of Amritapura, we find the Hoysala sculptors, they preferred using a separate green basalt stone so that the carving will become more crisp. So it will be, more intricate. So that is why the Mahanasi of the Shukanasa is another beautiful representation in which the Hoysala sculptors excelled. They had a very beautiful tableaus carved on them. This is one sculpture of Natesha found on the Amritapura temple. Next. Now coming to the various other kinds of temples built by the Hoysala. As I mentioned, the Hoysala inscriptions mention that they were proficient even in building Bhumija temples. So what is this Bhumija temple? Bhumija is a temple. Bhumija is a variety of temple mentioned in texts like Samarangana Sutradhara and Aparajita Pucha. So here what happens, this temple from the Adhisthana till, that is from the plinth up to the stupi, this will have a plan where we find that all the stories or levels are very repetitive. Bhumi means, Bhumi also refers to a tala or a story. So Bhumija means that the upper tala is born out of the lower tala. See, to understand that, we can see that we have turrets carved. In that turret we have again smaller turrets, and inside that turrets you find smaller turrets. So these are all like, this is a very typical Bhumija Prasada. Next slide. See, another Bhumija Vimana, and here we have to notice that these projections of the stellite plan from the Prasada onwards, they are to be identified as Rathas and Pratirathas, as we find in the texts of the Nagara order. So these are not the Bhadra and Karna projections as we find in our Dravida style temples. These are all the Rathas and Pratirathas which we find. And there is a mention of the term Ratha Nemi to referring to the contour of the temple in texts like Matsya Purana and other examples. Next. Now, as I said, the sculptors have called themselves as having carved innumerable number of Bhumija Prasadas and Shekhari Prasada and all those names we find. Now, how was it? Was it only on the structure of the temple? No. Here what happens, this is another like contribution to Hoysalas. where for decorative purposes of the lower portion of the wall, or especially the extended mantapas like Mukhamantapa and Mahamantapa, these pavilions used to have what is called as the kakshasanas. Kakshasanas were the seating facilities made within the mantapa. So the outer part of this kakshasanas were decorated with various themes. So one such theme which was used to decorate the extended mantapas, the adhisthana of the extended mantapa, was the carving of miniature shrines. See here we can have a very clear view of a Bhumija structure from the lowest portion, how it goes up to the the Griva part of the structure. And there are various other kinds of shikaras or prasadas we can find here. And here all the Shatvargas are carved. We have to notice that. It is not just the prasada. The entire shrine, entire miniature shrine with all the Shatvargas like the Adhisthana, the Bhikti, we have the Prastara here, with the Talas, then we have Griva, Shikara, Stupi, and all these aspects mentioned of the Shatvargas are shown. So this is where we can know that they could even build independent temples of these styles when required. So whatever was essential they built, but they also introduced such miniature shrines, which, and probably this was kind of imparting knowledge for junior sculptors when they're in their apprenticeship period, when they're getting trained into building huge structures. For them to give an idea, they used to adopt these methods also. Next slide. Now, this is what is called as Deva Kullaka. Deva Kullaka, as far as my knowledge and research goes, earlier to Hoysala period, we do not find many. Kullaka is a term which usually means short or miniature. So, if an entire temple is built in a very short form as a decorative shrine around the temple, then it is called as a Deva Kullaka. So, there are two varieties of Deva Kullakas built by Hoysalas. One was the Deva Kullakas which was built, buttressing to the main wall of the Garbhagriha. Because, as I mentioned earlier, the medium of stone used was soapstone invariably. That was softer. So, to give strength for taller structures, to give strength to the wall, they built these structures buttressing to the main wall so that the structure will not, it will not lean on the outer side, and there will be no damage. But we also find that the sculptors have used their wide imagination, and a lot of Nagara elements have been introduced. So first of all, we find that this Deva Kullaka has two stories in that. The concept of Dvitalas. There are two talas, one of the lower tala, and we find again the Adhisthana pattern followed, the Bhikti pattern followed. We have, the Kapota of the first tala, the Kapota of the second tala, it goes up to the Stupi. Now, there is, there's the extension of what is called as a Varandika in the Nagara style. The Nagara structures on their outer walls, many a times they built, this niche which housed images of the god, and these niche, they had an extended kind of, a small porch kind of extension. So these were called as the Varandikas. Varandika is a Sanskrit term. So the English term varanda is derived out of the Varandika. So these Varandikas can be seen, and they the upper talas need some amount of place to move around. So that is signified by building these Varandikas in the Deva Kullaka. This is a regular Deva Kullaka with all the Shatvargas of a main structure. Next slide, please. Now, as I said, the sculptures claim to have repeatedly mentioned that they had knowledge of varieties of Bhumija Prasadas. Now, Samarangana Sutradhara mentions the Bhumija Prasada can be classified into 16 varieties. But I don't know why it doesn't give any names to these varieties. But I think this is from the Belur temple. There are roughly about 16 such Devakullakas found around the temple with these Bhumija Prasadas. If a thorough, intricate study is done, using the measurements mentioned in the Samarangana Sutradhara, we can know if the Hoysala sculptors have implemented, because see, both these structures we can find the difference. There are only 5 talas in this Bhumija, whereas there are 6 talas in this Bhumija, and this is narrowly built. This is not, this is a bit, the tapering is not as narrow as we find in this Prasada. So with these differences in mind, I think some study can disclose to us about the adoption of Samarangana Sutradhara in Hoysala temples also. Next one, please. Coming to the pillars, pillars is another popular topic among the Hoysala architecture. Now, Hoysalas knew the execution of various varieties of pillars. But as I said, as the structures were of a softer medium, they had to give strength, and the interval between the pillars increased. They had to be nearer. So the number of pillars increased. The making of manufacturing of the pillars increased. Therefore, probably they had a method where they would just, according to the required height, of course, the pillars were just manufactured, and then they were fitted into the structures. So there was a parallel guild where the pillars kept on being manufactured. It does not mean that they knew only this kind of Shrikara temples. This is called as the Shrikara temple. And these pillars were made, they were produced with a method, a mechanical method, which was near to the lathe. We don't know what the exact lathe they had, but they adopted a method which was very near to the lathe. With that technology they have made, and these were very well polished and well rubbed. But they had other varieties of pillars also, because in a lathe-like technology, we can only make cylindrical temples with very good polish and some, linear decorations on that. But you cannot chop or cut or wrought a pillar with the intermediate fillets and other things just by a lathe-like technology. But this technology was surely used, and it was used for the most commonly used pillars in huge numbers. Next slide. See, we get references to that they had a technology which resembled the lathe technology. Here, because there are some scholars who make a blind argument saying, no, it was not made out of a lathe-like technology, because there are many pillars without that cylindrical smooth shaft, and all those they have arguments. Here, we can see on top of this pillar we find a knob. So probably they used to fit these the selected stone slab, the piece of stone, on two weight-bearing wooden bars. So then they used to turn it. They used to, like we do it from in the drawing a well, water from the well. We usually use this technology of turning. So like that, they must have turned it. And while that stone was turning, these people must have held a chisel to shape the shaft of the pillar. See, because here we can find some minor kind of lines which are formed out of the friction produced by the turning of that shaft, particular shaft. Next slide. See, we find such a knob on the pillar shaft. Next. Now, these pillars varieties also, we can see that small miniature models were used in various other decorative adjuncts of the structure. This is actually a Torana from Thottakattavalli temple. In the Torana, we find it's a Jitala Torana, and there we find the small pillarets of Shrikara variety carved, Shrikara variety. Next one. See, this is actually we make a mention of Chitrakhanda pillar, and many people have this popular notion that Chitrakhanda was used during the Vijayanagara period, but we cannot just draw lines and say this was during this period, that period. The texts were there, the sculptors knew, but they produced whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. So these are all the examples of other varieties of pillars used by the Hoysala sculptures. This is a Chitrakanda pillarite. Next. Now, we'll now understanding the Vesara variety. So, Vesara variety is another misconception of many people to identify it. They just feel if there are a lot of decorative motifs of the Nagara style, then the temple becomes Vesara. But there are that's not right always. So what happens, unfortunately, again, the descriptions or definitions we get in the majority of the Vastu Granthas, they are not very clear when it comes to Dravida, Nagara and Vesara. But they are always grouped together. Now, while talking about Bhumija or Shekari, they do not group them. But Dravida, Nagara and Vesara, they go hand in hand. They are usually described as a group in various texts. But the definition is really not very clear, not very applicable. But of course, that is not the point to be discussed now. I'll just try to concentrate on what Vesara means according to the text. So the nearest understanding of Vesara can be achieved by the reading of Kamikagama. Kamikagama says that there should be what do we say? There are three basic elements which decides a structure as Vesara. Now, that is one. It should be the mixture of Nagara and Dravida. The second argument, the second definition is it should be Gajaprishtavat, not a Gajaprishta. It should resemble a Gajaprishta. It should not be Gajaprishta, but Gajaprishtavat. And the third thing it says, it should be Vigata Ashra. Ashras are angles. Therefore, there should not be any angles in the temple structure. So this is what and we must understand one more thing. All these definitions are applicable only for the Garbhagriha, because the on plan and the elevation given the Shadvargas, everything is mainly for the Garbhagriha only, the Vimana part. Rest other it is left to the requirement and the freedom of the architects. So here, this is how we can see that the Somanathpura temple is one of the best examples for Vesara style, and we find few examples in the Hoysala temples which can be identified as Vesara based on these definitions. See, as I said, now the thing should have both Nagara and Dravida elements. So what is the basic difference between the Nagara and Dravida elements is that the Dravida, the architectural adjuncts, moldings of a Dravida temple will usually be vertically placed, while the Nagara, they seem to be horizontally placed. Now, if you observe, the Vargas are vertical. We have an Adhisthana, we have a Bitti, we have a Prastara, we have Talas, then we have Grivashikara. This is a regular Dravida Shadvarga. And they are arranged also in the vertical pattern. But when you observe that each and every level has been planned very horizontal, we can see that from the lowest molding till the uppermost thala, it goes like one curved bamboo. This thing. So that is what is recognized as Rekha Nagara. So this is the mixture of both Nagara and Dravida element, where we find both the horizontal and vertical arrangement of the architectural members. Next, it has to be Gajaprishtavat, not a regular Gajaprishta. So what happens? So to achieve Gajaprishta, we should have an apsidal plan. There shouldn't be any. And again, the Vesara should also be Vigata Ashra. So here we can see that if you join the points of these extensions, we can draw a line which is, and Gajaprishta is not limited only to the plan of the temple. Even in the elevation, this entire portion must have a bend, a form of curved Gajaprishta. The beautiful example of Gajaprishta we find in Mahabalipuram, where we have both the sculpture of an elephant and a Gajaprishta structure side by side. So this is Gajaprishtavat, and on the contour, if you match all these things, it doesn't have any ashra. So Vikata Ashra, Gajaprishtavat, and the elements of Nagara and Dravida put together Yes, so this is as I said, it is a rough way of understanding what Vesara is, but further studies need to be done to get more clarity about this particular style. Next slide. So we come to the last part of the lecture. As I mentioned, Hoysalas did not restrict that temple building only to the, of course, the modern geographical boundaries of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, it did not exist in those days, and they were more harmonious, though there was a lot of political rivalry. When it came to cultural and religious aspects, there is a lot of give and take and mutual respect we find in all the cultures of India, just not Chola and Hoysala. So Hoysalas have built a lot of temples in Tamil region also, and they have adopted the local regional style because availability of soapstone is not very easy there, and they cannot transport so much of soapstone to Tamil regions. But they have also continued the Chola tradition of temple building, but there are few points where they have left their mark. So we will just know what it is. Next slide, sir. I can take 10 more minutes, right?
5 minutes, if you could close, that will be great.
I will try to. I will try to. So this is the Hoysaleshwara temple, which is now. So this is the Hoysaleshwara temple, which is usually mispronounced as Bhojeshwara temple in Samayapuram of Trichinapalli. It's Samayapuram. The Vikramapura Kannanur is an hamlet of Trichy in the modern Trichy, and this is the Hoysaleshwara temple. We can see that the overall the presentation of the temple is very Chola in its form. Next. So we see the Upapita of Pratibhadra order and Padabandha Adhisthana. Padabandha Adhisthana we don't find in the Hoysala temples of Kannada regions. It is found only in the Tamil region. Next slide. See, introduction of Kumbha Panjara into the Hoysala temple. So Kumbha Panjaras was popularized by the Cholas, and they have adopted it. So this we find that Kumbha Panjara was also parallelly used along with Stambha Panjara. Next. See, this is the Purva Rupa, or the stereotype of the further some Samyukta Stambhas, which were popularized during the Vijayanagara period. So we find that, and there are names given to these Samyukta Stambhas, like this is an Andeshakanta Stambha, where you have 4 Upastambhas joined to the common shaft of the pillar. Like that, we get names in Kashyapa Shastra and other granthas. Next. So this is a Bhadrakanta Stambha. So what happens when it comes to the pillars, until the 13th century or the late 12th century, we find the Chola temples on plan did not possess a Guda Mantapa. And when they started introducing Guda Mantapas, the pillars were not of various kinds. They were very, very, very simple Chintrakanda pillars. So to understand what was the knowledge of pillars among the Chola architects could be seen from the Bittipadas and the temple walls. Because the texts say whatever rules are applied for the pada or the pillar has to be applied for the Bittipadas also. But it was after this introduction, and we find the tradition of building Guda Mantapa in the Kannada region from the Badami Charikya period itself. Therefore, it must have penetrated into the Tamil region during this, after the conquest of Tamil regions by Hoysalas, or even in the early Kalyani Chalukyan period. Because the earliest temples of Pallava or Chola, if you observe, on plan they are all a Garbhagriha and an Ardha Mantapa. So the pillar varieties are less when compared to the upper part of the southern Deccan region. So this is a Bhadrakanta variety of Stambha in the Hoysaleshwara temple. Next slide. So here we find a regular Hoysala period, a pillar which is carved out of a hard medium. So this is from the Chandrachudeshwara temple of Hosur, and it is built during the Ballala period of Ballala III. So we find that all these presentations are very similar to the Hoysala pillars of the heartland. Next one. So there are some stray pillars found in and around Dharmapuri and the modern Krishnagiri district. If we go around, see, these are all we can see the cylindrical regular Hoysala pillars. The difference is the typical Hoysala pillars many times used to have the decoration of a ghanta or a bell. Here what we find is the decoration of a kumbha. Kumbha was another decorative motif which was popular in the Chola Dravida style. Next. See here, we see that the Adhisthana is Padabandha Adhisthana, but the Hoysalas, as it was their nature, they decorated and embellished each and every adjunct of the even that Padabandha Adhisthana. So increasing or embellishing with decoration was the norm of the Hoysala sculptors. Next. See, we find the Kapota and Prastara, which is again gained a lot of ornation during the. This temple is from Taramangalam and it was built during the Ramanath Deva's reign. Next one. Taramangalam is a village near Omlu of Salem district. Now, this is the Yelunilai Gopuram, all the Saptatala Gopuram built by Veera Someshwara for one of the entrances in the Jambukeshwara temple at Tiruvanekkavu. So we can also know that the building of such gopuras was not something which suddenly appeared during the Vijayanagara period. It had already taken its birth by the late Chola and late Hoysala period itself. And this has seven talas, and we can see next slide. See, we can see that Hoysalas started using the Simhapada Stambhas. Simhapada Stambhas were shaded. So they adopted it as a decorative motif, and we find such Simhapada Stambhas used in the Airavateshwara temple of Dharasuram in huge numbers. Next slide. And so that is the, and so this is the, a very brief introduction of Hoysala architecture and some unique observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manoj. Manoj, we can't see your video.
Is it
Hello.
so?
Yeah. Last year, I think maybe there was an internet connectivity problems.
No?
No, not
because I can see both of us.
Oh, I see. Okay. Seems to be okay now. Sorry, I mean, there are quite a few questions, but we do have limited time. So I will just ask a couple of questions only. This Devakullaka. So Subramanian Kannan wants to know, is this something similar to the Devakulikas of Kanchi Kailasanatha temple?
Yeah, almost the same. Yes. They are very
except
similar.
That there they are almost like separate shrines on the sides and not used to buttress.
What we find in Kanchipuram temple, that's the Rameswaram temple, they can be actually, there are more of this Parivaralaya kind which are built to the wall of the temple, prakara of the temple itself. They are not very independent structures. Whereas these Kullakas are independent structures.
Those still connected to the rest of the structure. So it is not a structure on the round almost. It's still,
that's what they're independent structures.
Right. But in a sense, I can see, for example, if you remember the Ramanuja Mandapam of Mamallapuram, where you have two temple structures, but not in the round, but in a bas-relief model.
Yeah, see what happens, these Devakullakas were independent structures during the Hoysala period. By the time of Vijayanagara period, when they started carving Sri Bhoga Adhishtanas, what you are telling, the bas-relief kind of Devakullakas appear in huge numbers.
I'm saying it started appearing even earlier with Pallavas.
Maybe,
And,
yes. As I said,
even,
everything
for
will have
example,
some earlier beginning, right?
Or for that matter, even the Raulafadi caves of the even the Chalukyas. You see that in the on the front. I mean, very very rudimentary on either side, if you remember. So that's one. Your description of the introduction to the Vesara style, as in what can you call as Vesara? That's really really interesting and useful. That was thank you for that. I think it can be extended, studied further. So, question from Mr. Nageshwar Rao is, what is the difference between Madanikas and Alasakanyas? I think.
Okay. Alasya Kanya, Madanikas are all the varieties of Salabanjikas. See, what happens in Buddhist architecture also, we find many sculptures of intoxicated women and women in various amorous positions. So these are all referred to as the Alasya Kanyas. It is just a name given to the Salabanjika. Salabanjika and Puttali are the common terms used.
Okay.
I feel Puttali is the most appropriate term because Salabanjika also denotes one particular posture.
Okay. So again, there are many questions, and unfortunately, we are
running out of
time. And also, there were a little bit of technical difficulties which robbed us of some at least 10+ minutes. Otherwise, we would have really given more time to discuss. So, in the interest of time, let me invite Kishore to thank you and also introduce the next speaker. Thank you, Manoj.
Thank you, Dr. Manoj. Obviously, we're not able to see you. Your video is, but thank you very much on behalf of Tamil Heritage Trust. We now go on to our next talk, which is Chandelas and the peak of Nagara Temple architecture. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Fanikant Mishra. Dr. Fanikant Mishra, after completing his diploma in archaeology, completed his PhD in the same field. He worked in the ASI since 1981 in various capacities. He retired as regional director for ASI East Zone. At present, he heads the heritage cell in Maulana Abul Kalam University, Calcutta, to spread heritage awareness and education. He has published 6 books on Kadambas, history, art, and architecture of the Hoysalas, Khajuraho with its latest discoveries, researches in art, architecture, culture, and religion, archaeology of Sikkim, conservation. He has also published 23+ research papers on archaeology, temples, excavations, etc. Some of his key excavations include Chandravalli, Hampi in Karnataka, Udaipur, Ramapuram in Andhra Pradesh, Buddhist site at Chetru, Harappan site, Rakigari, Diorkotar, Reva, Sanchi, and Sadara. In terms of conservation, Dr. Mishra was involved in the Harappan Mound in Ropar, Punjab, Agroha, Banwali Buddhist sites, Sanchi, and Sadara UNESCO project. He was also involved in the restoration of Bhojpur Temple. Basic infrastructure at Bhimbetka for UNESCO status qualification. His passion for Khajuraho is really evident. During 1999-2000, the development of the entire complex was taken up to conserve, to develop the landscape, erect a new museum for display of sculpture, and attract domestic and international tourists. New discoveries and exposure of earlier structure as a result of excavation have been carried out under Dr. Mishra's guidance. I'd like to now welcome Dr. Fanikant Mishra to deliver his lecture on the Chandelas architecture.
Dr. Mishra,
thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, but your video needs to be switched on. Yeah.
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Yeah. You're visible now.
Yeah. Thank you very much for introducing me on this dais. First of all, I think 10 minutes less for good afternoon. So I will say good morning to each one of you present today online lecture on Chandelas and the peak of Nagar temple architecture. Although this topic is a topic which has been given to me by Professor Babu, but my interest was to speak on the newly discovered 26th temple at Khajuraho during millennium year. But still, I will try to make it more interesting for all of you. It is a moment of extreme pleasure to be with you all for this. Before we begin this lecture, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Shiv Shankar Babu, Tamil Heritage Trust, as making this Indo Festival 22 in a so planned and well managed in an academic background, with calling all the scholars from all over the country. It is a great academic event. And to all of you who sincerely committed to this event to make it so successful. So thank you very much. Now, let me start and tell you something about this Khajuraho monument, which all of us know very well. All over the world, people know about Khajuraho monument. It is such a popular monument which don't need any introduction. We know that in northern India, there was a beginning of architecture which we find from the Gupta period. That was early Gupta period. That was the Nagara style of temple architecture. So it is started from 3rd century BC. The temple number 17, what we are getting at Sanchi, Madhya Pradesh, is the earliest evidence of Nagar style of architecture. We see in coming years lot of improvements, lot of developments, lot of additions, alterations we saw in the Nagar style of architecture. And while we are coming to Khajuraho, these temples, which was built from 9th century till 13th, late 13th century, had come to its peak of the Nagar style of architecture, which all of you know. It is nothing new which I would be telling to you. We know that this last stage of Nagar style, which we are getting at Khajuraho, is the living example which any archaeologist or any scholar can see to it. So I will just give you a brief introduction. What was this Nagar style? I think if you can put that slide number 17.
17, sir?
Kandaria Mahadev temples.
Yeah, I will just
structure.
Go to 17. Is that
no, that is, I think you crossed it. I think you crossed it.
Okay, 1 second, let me just
you go back.
This one?
Yes. We can keep this also if you don't have that other which I forwarded you. Anyway, you keep this one, just blow it up. You can't
I
make
can't.
little bigger?
No.
Okay, no problem. Now all the scholars or academicians, you are looking to this temple, the Kandaria Mahadev temple. I think any experts of architecture all over the world, if they would see to this temple, they will accept with one voice that it has the superb architectural elements. Now we cannot add anything to it which can give the final touch to this. While I was in Khajuraho, as a superintending archaeologist of Bhopal zone, this monument was under me, and I had to plan for this monument with my all details and submitted the report to the UNESCO that why it should be considered as a World Heritage Monument. The UNESCO people came to Khajuraho. When they came to Khajuraho, they wanted to see this Kandaria Mahadev temple. There was a plan to see this for half an hour. But you would be surprised to know that those French and Japanese scholar said that, sir, we will change the program and we will sit here for hours and hours to see this Kandaria Mahadev temple. They had some camera, they had some very high lenses. First, they were looking to the Amlaka. The Amlaka, the upper portion which we are seeing. They was visualizing it, they were measuring it, they were telling it is so proportionately built as if some supernatural power had come and they have installed this Amlaka. It is so well chiseled, it is so proportionately kept there. So one by one they were making the drawing and they started from the Amlaka, then they came to axis, Mundi, Shikhara. About Shikhara also they started working on it and they were measuring it with their tapes and notes. Then they came to the Garbhagriha part. They saw the Garbhagriha part. They came to the image. Likewise, the mandapas, the plinth, every portion they were calculating. He was an architect, some Blossom Zio. I asked him, why are you working so hard? Are you going to do some research after you go back to France, Paris? They said, no, sir. I want to see this temple. This temple is totally complete in an architectural form. The Jagati they were measuring, I was also not aware. I am not an expert of architecture, tell you very frankly. I was also very upset when they were measuring the Jagati. They told me, you know the measurement of Jagati? I said, no, I have not. I don't know. I must have given you in my report, but I don't remember. They said it is 34 feet in length. And if you can ask some of your engineers to measure, the height of the temple will be also 34 feet. I was surprised. I sent my engineer and I found that the height of the temple was also 34 feet. So what I want to tell you, during that 11th, 12th century, our architecture growth of the Nagar style was so popular, so well, that it had no minus things which we could see in that. And that was Khajuraho. That was Khajuraho, although we are getting same type of evidences in some other temples of that time also, like Sun Temple in Modhera and some Ocean Temple in Gujarat likewise. But Khajuraho was at its peak. It has been known to everyone that this Khajuraho temple is one of the very lucid temple architecture of North India. It has one peak or Shikhara. As I told you, we have an example of Sun Temple Modhera, also of the same age, same pattern. Jagannath Temple at Puri, also we had the same evidence of the same pattern of Nagar style. All are built on a stone platform with steps leading up to it. Second characteristic is it doesn't not usually have elaborate boundary walls or gateways. You won't see in these temples of Chandelas any boundary walls or gateways like we see in Dravida style or in other styles. As I told you, Gupta dynasty started this style and continued to be prevalent across the geography of North India until the advent of Muslim invasions in 13th century. Khajuraho group of temples and Sun Temple Konark, Temple at Modhera, Gujarat and Ocean temples, some of the best examples we are having in North India of the Nagara styles. This style developed between Himalayas to Vindhyas. Now we come to Khajuraho, the best example at Khajuraho, which was a temple known as Lakshman Temple of Khajuraho, which was dedicated to Vishnu. It was built in 1954 by the Chandela kings. As we know, the Chandela king was one of the big builders, architects. I sometimes, as an archaeologist, I feel that who were these artisans? How these artisans were employed? Many places all over the world, when I go for lectures, I myself is not able to give any answer to it. And even the others who sit with me, they are also not in a position to give answer how these temples were built. These Chandela temples were mostly built in the Panchayatan architecture, which consisted of minor shrines arranged in a crucified ground plan in relation to main shrine. In front of the main shrine, there are meeting halls called mandapa. Images of river goddesses Ganga and Jamuna were put outside the Garbhagriha. There was no water tanks or reservoirs, which we could see in these Nagara style of Chandela temples in the grounds. In general, and most temples were constructed on high platforms. There was a pillared approach to the porticos. Shikharas were divided in three categories. One was Latina. Latina, they were square at base with inward curving walls and came to a point at the top. Then second was Famsana. They are broader and shorter than the Rekha Prasad type of Shikhara. Vallabhi, a rectangular structure with a roof that extends into a round of chamber. Chandela school, as we see at Khajuraho, is unlike Orishan style. These temples are considered as a single unit and have shikhars that curved from bottom to the top. There are a number of miniatures shikhars arising from the central tower and towers that slowly rise up to the main tower, cap both the patios and halls. Chandela temples architecture was superb, but the superiority, the maximum art of sculpture is also very interesting to see here. Like my previous scholar was talking about Hoysala temple architecture. In Hoysala sculptures also, we find that those sculptures are still looking like a living sculptures. Same thing is in these Khajuraho Chandela temples. The Khajuraho temples feature of Nagar style, what we know very well, that these temples are the largest group of Hindu and Jain temples. The sculptures have odd generation of people with their architectural brilliance and intricate carvings. These temples are in fact considered a celebration of womanhood. The sculpture of Khajuraho obtains its maturity. What is that maturity? The maturity, what we can explain, all we academicians know very well, that if the head is built, it is proportionate. It looks that there is a life. If the nose is built, nose looks as if it is a living nose. Lips, cheeks, every part of the body is having no mistakes of even 1 centimeter or half centimeter or point decimal centimeters. The Khajuraho sculptures have broadly been divided in 5 categories. One category we get here is the cult images. Second, we get the family attendant and enclosing divinities. Third, we get heavenly nymphs. And most important what I feel here is the animal and other species, which we find in these temples in bulk, in certain place only. It is not in the whole temple, but at one patika, we find only animals and other species. Temple is having, the fifth one, the temple is having varying art level. The sculpture displayed here, especially in Parshanath and Lakshman temples, are continued as very artistic, superb. It attains the maturity in Kandaria temple also, where human figures is very proportionately carved. Now, this was the time when up to 13th century, the Khajuraho temple architecture and the sculptural art was at the final stage. But here at Khajuraho, we archaeologists also see that there was a decline of art. There was decline of architectural construction also after 13th century. The first we see the decline of sculptural art at Zawari temple and at Chaturbhuj temple. This Javari and Chaturbhuj temple is a big example of downfall of the temple architecture and the sculpture. What are the downfall? Now disproportionate sculptures are seen here. Very vulgar face. Not, you can recognize that the artist has lost his mind now. Hands are big, legs are big, tummy is disproportionate. Breast is also shown as if it is the breast which we are seeing in 12th and 13th century is very different. And here what we are seeing, we feel they have not given a full mind to work on it. So this comparative study also we can see at Duladev temple and Chaturbhuj temple here at Khajuraho. So my sense, what I wanted to tell you in a very brief about this architecture, that it has got the maximum height of the best part of architecture of the world. Whenever I give you one more example to it. When I was the head of that full area and Khajuraho was under me, so Government of India raised the entry fee from 10 rupees to 100 rupees. You know, foreigners were very much upset. Foreigners said, no, we have already planned for 10 rupees. We will not go for 100 rupees. So there was a big chaos at Khajuraho monument. Suddenly my secretary of Ministry of Culture rang me and told me, Dr. Mishra, you have to fly, you have to go to Khajuraho and just find out what these foreign tourists are doing there. So we have received so many complaints. So that time the air facility was not very good. We had to go via Delhi and then to Khajuraho. So when I reached, it was 4 o'clock in the evening. There was about 213 foreign tourists, which they were standing there and they were shouting at archaeological survey officers and they were asking them to allow them with only 10 rupees ticket. I reached there. I said, don't take ticket from them. Return even 10 rupees ticket which they have given. And I asked all these 213 people to come with me free of cost inside my temple, inside my monument. I took them to Kandaria Mahadev. I started showing the temple from exterior first, and then I took them to the interior wall. And when we came down, I asked them, do you know how many sculptures you have seen here? They said, no, sir, we didn't count it. I said, you have seen 5,796 sculptures. We have counted. It is in Kandaria Mahadev temple. Come on, I will take you to other temple. So I took him to the Western group till 10:30 in the night. They all came to me and they said, sir, this is the 100 rupees fees. We want to give it. Nowhere in world we could see this kind of architecture, this kind of temple having this craftsmanship. So 100 rupees is also less. So what I am going to tell you that our Nagar style, what we see, we call it, has totally prospered at Khajuraho. The Khajuraho artisans were very well expert. They had their acumen and they tried to build this temple in the best possible manner. And they have done it. They have done it with the engineering skill. They have done it with full measurement. There is not single point decimal mistakes they have done it. So this, I just wanted to brief you about this architecture. But my main interest, which I wanted to tell you, that at Khajuraho, you know, there was a millennium year celebration. In millennium year celebration, the President of India, Narayanan, wanted to come there and stay there for 5 days. Full Madhya Pradesh government and government of India, all officers, chief ministers, DM, PM, everybody was there present to see that Honorable President's visits is very successful. I, being the head of that zone, I asked my all officers that let us take advantage of this situation and let us work for discovery of new temples. As Khajuraho was having this information that Chandelas had built 80 temples in the surroundings. So where were these temples? We were all trying to discover, because till then we had only 25th temple available at Khajuraho. So we sat on the map and we thought, ki, let us put the team on north, south, east and west. I called all my archaeologists, and like in Ramayana when Sita was to be searched, so Jambavant had sent the team in all 4 directions. Likewise, I also asked my friends to go in all directions. Unfortunately or fortunately, I took the southern direction. Southern direction, I was thinking it is not very auspicious, but still we thought, let us work in southern directions. With me was my Deputy Superintending Archaeologist, Mr. Tahir, few assistant archaeologists, and we started exploring that area. We had one inscription of Ballal II. That inscription was mentioning that Khajuraho had one of the largest temple which existed for 700 years. So me and another scholar, Devangana Desai, who had done a lot of works on Khajuraho temple, were just very much anxious to discover this temple, where it is, this largest temple. How suddenly it disappeared. We are not able to trace it out. So Devangana Desai, whenever she used to meet me, she would tell, Dr. Mishra, when you go to that area, you must think about that and work on it. So I think on the 3rd day, when we were exploring and we were not getting any monument, we thought, let us go close to the airport area and see how the things are there. So just at the back of airport, Khajuraho airport, about 400 meters from there in the southern side, we saw one very big mound. It was thickly vegetated. And on the top of that mound, we saw one shivling. The height must be tentatively around 45 meters from the ground level. But the whole mound was badly vegetated. All plants and all that nuisance, all these greeneries were there. So me and Tahir, that time I was also young, it was in 1999. So we thought, let us run to that place and let us have a darshan of shivling on the top. What is this shivling? It is only seen. So while we were going, we saw many architectural fragments here and there. I said, no, this is nothing but this some temple ruins which we are seeing here. Tahir also told me, yes, sir, we are seeing these architectural fragments. They are all part of the temple. So we went on the top, and by reaching the top, we came to this conclusion that this is some largest temple. This is some biggest temple which we can find here. Then there was a big noise. Amitabh Bachchan had come to that place, and he also visited with me for 4 or 5 days. And he said, how did you discover? How would you say that it is the largest temple? So we said, sir, we will explore it and we will work on it. Honorable President was also informed about that. My secretary was Ajay Shankar. He was very excited. He came every day for 5 days. He was there. Every day he used to come to that temple. We asked the artisans to clean all vegetations. So while the vegetations were being cleaned, so many new things we were getting. So we came to this conclusion within 4 or 5 days that this is one of the temple of Khajuraho which is missing. And immediately I announced that this is the 26th temples which we have discovered. Then Government of India protected this temple as a monument of national importance. And in 2000, I gave a proposal to do the excavation there. Although excavating that temple was very easy work for we archaeologists, it was not a site which needs any trench type of things where we are getting any very micro things and all. But we started the excavation. Our team of Bhopal Circle of Archaeological Survey of India started the excavation under my direction. That place was known as the Bija Mandal area, and it was known as the Bija Mandal group of mounds. So we started the excavations. As I told you, it is in the western group of temples as the crow flies. It has among the conspicuous architectural remains we found during the survey was Kichaka, bracket, and Leoglyph. The mound was surmounted by a small platform of coarse dressed stones, which is capped by broken marble, Yoni Patta, having enshrined marble Shivlinga. As I told you. So can you show that slide, my dear friend?
Which slide?
Of the new temple?
Which is...
You go ahead.
Down the line?
Go ahead. No. I sent you yesterday.
I don't know whether it has been added to this, but I can just keep going down and...
Keep going down. It must be in the last. Yes. Come back. Yes. Here we are. This is that Bija Mandal temple which you are seeing. I told you the Shivling, that Shivling on the top we are seeing. After exposing all these places in 2000, we could get this plinth portion, which was very well dressed. And it was a mount, as I told you, the dressed stones, which is capped by a broken marble Yoni Patta. Thus, this mound with Shivling is the highest point, and enclosing broken Yoni Patta has been taken up for excavation in order to expose the basal extent remains of this temple. On understanding the nature of deposits which we could find here in the topmost levels, from the initial probings, excavations were continued on the sides of the mounds, so as to expose the extant moldings. Initially, itself from the maze of partly hidden and exposed structures, the entire architecture of the Garbhagriha, Antaral, Mahamandapa, Mandapa, and Ardha Mandapa was construed. The extant remains observed are belonging to the Peeth and Adhisthana moldings, which we saw just now. Can you put the second slides? No, this one. It was in the layer number 1. It appears light brownish gray to blackish in color. It contains predominant amount of silty soil, chips of stones possibly of in situ craftsmanship, and several architectural fragments. Other anthropogenic remains include broken sculptural parts with an occasional limb, legs, face, or head, etc. The total thickness from the edifice, we can see this. It was 125 centimeters. Then we go to the second layer. This second layer also had predominantly consisting of brickbats. Interestingly, thus out as it moves away from the sides of temple. Interestingly, the brickbats are not seen west of the Garbhagriha. In the Antaral, region layers of chips are found within the general layer 2 of the brickbats. The layers have several differences, possibly indicating towards the nature of activities in the precincts, particularly in the Garbhagriha and Mahamandapa portion. Now, what I want to tell you another very interesting thing, which for the first time in Khajuraho we could discover, that we had one stupa type of structure in this area, very close to this temple. And that stupa's brick was of the later early Gupta period size. And that stupa was having one Vedika also. That also we found it here. So for the first time in Khajuraho area, some remains of Buddhist religion was also seen during these excavations. So now we go with the depositions there. The layer is again changing. This change of layers, what I find that after 200 years, after 300 years, some changes were done in it. And so there was the change in the soil. Lastly, when we exposed the whole structure, then we thought, let us make a measurement of the plinth portion. Till now, we had the largest temple, that was Kandaria Mahadev, and Kandaria Mahadev's temple's plinth measurement was 34 meters. Here at this temple, we could find the measurement of this temple was 35 meters. We tried to measure it from all sides. It was coming 35 meters. So definitely the superstructure must have been also 35 meters. So with this we found that Veer Balala II's inscription, which has given some reference about this kind of temple, we got it here. Thirdly, what is very important to tell you here was that we found 3 types of sculptures here. One sculpture which we found was of 8th, 9th century. They were not very proportionate. They were not very well built up. Then one part of the sculpture which we found was of 11th, 12th and 13th century. Like Sursundari, Dancing Girl. Such a proportionately built sculpture. At times, we scholars, when we used to sit with the sculptures, we used to discuss whether Kandaria Mahadev temple sculpture has missed something, what we are getting here in this temple. So we were confused about it, because those sculptures were very fine built, very proportionately built. It has all ornamentation, even necklace, bangles, like we see in Hoysala temples at Elapit and Belur. With a stick, you can just shift the bangles. Similar things we are getting here also. Although that is a plastic art, that stone is a very different stone, but Khajuraho stone is a very different stone. But here also we got many sculptures like that of 10th, 11th and 13th, 12th, 13th century. Then the third phase is also seen here. That third phase, what I told you, there was a downfall in sculptural art. That is, we found that some of the sculptures are very disproportionate. It looks very tall. Hands are disproportionate, legs are disproportionate, body is disproportionate. So all these three era this temple had seen. Whereas the plinth portion, which we see, there is no difference, there is no error in that plinth portion. Plinth portion is very nicely carved, like we get all details of architecture in Samranga Sutradhara and in other texts, in other temples. So they have followed all that very religiously. Plinth portion has no changes. What I feel during 10th, 11th, 12th century, this plinth portion would have been constructed. So they are very perfect. Whereas other things like sculpture, like the upper part also we saw somewhere, even in Amlaka also we found 7 Amlaks. In one Amlak we found it was very different kind of Amlak. It was looking like some animal figurine has come in that Amlak. So these were the changes in the later period. We see it in other temples also. So these were the changes which we could find here. And another very important thing which is required here now, for which I think ASI, I have also written to ASI many a times that they should take up this. We have not gone up to the virgin soil area. We feel we got some stray potteries also. Those potteries were of Gupta period, not beyond that. But we should have gone up to the ground level. That we had no time and our rains had come, so we stopped it. And after 2000, nobody had gone for any excavation there. So what I feel about this, because this research work, after giving the genesis of architectural activities in the region, I dwell into the socio-political parameters here, cause the temples of diverse affiliation and materials. The materials were also very different here. At one stage, at second stage, at third stage, there were changes in the materials also, although the stone was same. But the stones built up has changed. It ponders to ask several pertinent questions, which is coming in my mind. Was it the sectarian affiliation that caused the Jain temple? We got so many Jain images also here, which nowhere we are getting it, not in Kandaria or any other temple. We get only in Parshanath and other eastern side temples. But here we got Jain images also, and that Jain images were of all the three phases. That means Jain activity was also here. So was it the was Jain temples to be huddled at one place? Why the later temples did not cluster around the earlier ones, like the Chausat Yogini temple? I think you know there the earliest temple what we are getting is of Chausat Yogini. The stone of Chausat Yogini is very different than the stone used in other temples. That has got some granite effect, very rough stone. So some evidences here in this temple, some stones we got of granite effect also. That was also very interesting to find here. Then I asked, what was the impact of this temple over the society and the later temple building? Why this temple? Was it a teaching place? Was it a center of art? Was it a place where artisans were taught about the temple construction? So these things are coming in my mind. Just I am putting it before you to just keep these questions in their mind so that we should know. And then I asked how it is reflected in the depiction of the temples. the interpretations of sculptures, mason marks, and inscription coherently will give the entire level society moving ahead amidst battles and wars with neighboring powers. We have got many sculptures of war scenes here. Tremendous sculptures. I think 685 sculptures were there of war scenes. So what was it reflecting? So my contention here is the last temple which we are getting here in Khajuraho was Duladev, which is very near to the river. The later temples have shown a greater skewness towards southern area, namely the earlier temples. Within the area of Khajuraho, repeatedly, there were 85 temples, not 80, 85 temples. The veracity of legend is to be further searched. We have to go and find out. We have only 26 temples. The 25 temple was reported. This was my 26th temple. So where are the other temples? Besides the 26th temple protected by Archaeological Survey of India, we have also discovered 18 mounds here. They also reveal about the temple architecture, 2 of which have been excavated also. Both the mounds have revealed temples buried under the sand of time. These explored and excavated remains are, however, only the tip of the iceberg, hinting towards the vast body of archaeological heritage lying unexposed at Khajuraho. The exposition of all the remains would throw even more light on the socio-political scenario, including the structural ethos, beliefs, and guilds in the pre-Chandela and Chandela times on the basis of material evidence. So I am briefing you very shortly about this, that I think you people are aware of this 26th temple. You people know about this. Now I will ask the respected friend to just give us a brief look of the slides for PPT which I have sent you from number 1 onwards.
Okay, sir. Let me just take it to slide 1.
Yeah.
And you can give that brief explanation. As you ask me to change the slide, I will change it immediately.
I'll tell you.
Where do I take it? The first image, this one?
Yeah. No, even one was earlier than this also.
Yeah.
Just the introduction, I have already given them introduction.
Yes.
They don't need site and surrounding also. As all of you know that there are Hindu, Jain and possibly Buddhist temples. Possibly I say because I could not get much evidences very authentically about Buddhism. And Khajuraho group of monuments was built by Chandela dynasty, and most everybody is aware of it. The temple inscriptions suggest many of the currently surviving temples were complete between 970 to 1030 AD, with further temples completed during the following decades. Most temples were built during the reigns of the king Yashovarman and Dhanga. You know, these 2 rulers were really, I can say they were warrior also, but they had some God blessings for construction of this kind of temples. The Chitragupt and the Kandariya Mahadev temple is one of the glaring examples built by these 2 rulers. Yashovarman's legacy is best exhibited in the Lakshman Temple also. Lakshman Temple is another very beautiful example of Nagara style. Vishwanath Temple best highlights King Dhanga's reign. The largest and currently most famous surviving temple is Kandariya Mahadev, built in the reign of Vidyadhara. Vidyadhara was the main who started Kandariya. Later on, Yashovarman took it over. Next. As you all know that UNESCO has recognized it as a World Heritage Monument, and 2000, I explained you, they were very happy, the UNESCO experts, when they came to know. They asked me one more question. Dr. Mishra, we knew only about the erotic sculptures here at Khajuraho. We were not knowing about these other sculptures, the other art of Khajuraho. So what is this? I told him, Ki, Baba, you come and see in Kandariya Mahadev Temple, you will get only 5% erotic sculptures. And this, this Chandela temples had got another very interesting characteristic. That is, in the exterior, you find everything. Complete life, complete world you can see in the exterior, in the form of sculpture, in the form of architecture. But when you go inside the temple, it is all plain. There is no sculpture or there is nothing like that except some few windows. And when you are reaching towards the God, you are free from all worldly things. And you just concentrate yourself towards the God. This was the artisans or the ruler's mind, which he wanted to produce it here. I think nowhere in the world, in any of the temple or in the country, we get this sense of mind. And in that, eroticism is also one of the part of the life. So at the western side, they have put erotic sculptures. Those erotic sculptures are also, non-practical sculptures. As if you will have a sort of grana. You will not like to see those life. So the ruler or the artisans want to tell you that this is the world. This is not only the world. The world, you have to go inside the Garbhagriha. And then when you reach before the God, you forget everything of the life. And when you reach there, you are concentrated, you are devoted to the deity. Next. There are some other different Nagara style we are getting at Bhubaneswara, North Indian temple style in Orissa and in other part of the country. So I have put these sculptures. Next. Here is the Kandariya Mahadev temple's details of the architecture. This is one of the marvelous example, as I had already explained you earlier. Deity resides in sanctum and it is very plain. The sanctorium is surrounded by interlinked passages, that is Sandhara, which also have side and front balconies for the air, for the light to come inside the Garbhagriha. Next. This is another Mukteshwar temple, 950, 975. Next. Yeah, Mukteshwar temple ceiling. That is very interesting. The ceiling here, we get only one in this Mukteshwar temple like this. In no other, we are getting this type of ornamentation of flowers or any other things. And the sculptures also. Next. We have just made a comparative study about the Kalinga and the Chandela. Khajuraho as the curvilinear form of primary tower is repeated in the roofs of the Mandapa, Mahamandapa, Mandapa and Ardhamandapa. This compares versus temples in Orissa, in which Viman tower above the sanctuary is the only strongly vertical component. The mandap's roofs maintain a tired pyramid shape with a strong horizontal moldings that detract from its overall upward thrust gradual roof. Further, the mandapa create a smooth rise from the entranceway eastern end to the dramatic summit over the sanctuary western end, clinging towers. The sides of the primary tower over the sanctum are covered with smaller tower-like forms in Khajuraho, further accentuating the vertical momentum and creating a more dynamic three-dimensional surface. With one notable exception, Rajarani Temple in Bhubaneswar, the practice was not pursued in Orissa. Only in Rajarani we get that. Next. These are the projections I have shown you. One is rectangular. It has got, Khajuraho has got little differentiation. So I have just given you a difference between Orissan and Chandela architecture. Next. Platform is also different in Chandela architecture. You find high platform. Finally, greater verticality is seen. Khajuraho temples were placed on broad platforms. Most Odishan temples are directly on the ground. They are like in other, we can say it is from the Bhumija, from the ground only these temples developed, whereas Khajuraho temples had the plinth, high plinth. Next. This is the North Indian style of temple, one plan which I am showing you here. Next. Temple evolution, I have just really spoke to you. You can go to next. Now, Khajuraho, we have got two groups, as you know, Western group, Eastern group. Western group, we had earliest one is Varaha, then Lakshmi, then Lakshmana, Mataneshwar, Kandariya Mahadev, Jaktambi, Chitragupta, Vishwanath Temple, Parvati Temple, Pratapeshwar Temple. And Eastern group, we have these monuments like Vamana Temple, Javari Temple, Brahma Temple, Ghantai Temple. Parshvanath is the another example like Kandariya, where we have got many Jaina sculptures in Parshvanath and Adinath and in Shantinath. Beautiful Jaina sculptures. Most of the Jaina sculptures are very well ornamented. They are very well defined, very proportionately built. Some of the sculptures we find even better than the Kandariya monument. And we have outside group. Outside group, I told you the Chauset Yogini is the earliest one. That stone is different. Lalgua Mahadev is another. And Bija Mandal, which I have discovered in 1999. Next. This is Chauset Yogini. This is the earliest temple where we have got 64 yoginis sculptures inside. Some are missing, but there are 64 halls here. Next. Lalgua Mahadev temple is another temple which I call it to be the little extension of Gupta period. That Gupta architecture we can see here, and we have some evidences of the plain porch and pillars, and we have these evidences also that superstructure has started. This goes to 7th century AD. Next. Brahma Temple of 925 is also one of the earliest example in Khajuraho, the beginning of the temple style. Next. And this is the sculpture inside. Very, very beautiful sculpture of Shiva from the four sides in different poses, in different mudras. Varaha Temple is another very interesting temple because someone call it to be a Nandi Mandapa and some call it as a Varaha temple. But this Varaha is a very lucid Varaha where so many Shiva ornamentation, Vishnu ornamentation is done. Vishnu sculpture is built there. Next. So we see the Lakshman Temple, 939, another very big example of the Chandela art, the proportionately built with all complete architecture in it of the Nagara style. Built by Yashovarman, the ruler of Chandela, who was the master of temple art and architecture during his time. Many temples at Khajuraho was built. Next. Again in Lakshman Temple, we are getting different kind of sculptures also. The sculptures which we are getting in Lakshman Temple are not so much ornamented, very plain. As you see this Ganesha, they are not ornamented. But if you go and see in Kandariya Mahadev, Ganesha is having ornamentation. Here you see the legs, they are plain, simple. His tongue is very simple. So there is a comparative study about simplicity and ornamentation also. Next. This is another very interesting Vishwanath Temple. This is also of the same type, built in 1000 by Yashovarman king only. And this has its own grace and grandeur. Next. Mataneshwar Temple. Mataneshwar Temple is another very interesting temple of 1000 AD. It has got very high steps to reach the temple, and the shivling is very big. It is 28 feet high, and the devotees used to go by steps up to the pranal. So this Matangeshwar is still living temple. There's still Khajuraho people go there for puja and worship. Next. Chitragupt. It's side, in this Chitragupt we are getting Surya image. This was a temple which was built for Surya worship. But the same style, with the same architectural developments. Next. Jaktambi Temple. Jaktambi Temple has got little, it is not looking so magnificent or high. It has got not that big plinth. So this is another temple, Jaktambi, which is coming to 12th, 13th century, where we find some changes in temple architecture. Next. Kandara Mahadev, we have already discussed about this. It is in the 6,500 square meters. Its height is 117 feet. Orientation east, and length is 98.4 feet. Width is 63.2 feet. Next. The Shikhara portion of the Kandariya Mahadev. Very interesting thing is to see here the windows they have given. And that windows, when you are inside the sanctum, you feel that light and air is very open, and you don't feel that its height is so big, its plinth is so big, so there will be dampness, or there will be something like confusion, no light. So these balconies from all sides, at least in some temples from the northern and eastern side, definitely they have given that. Next. This is the Garbhagriha, which I told you, the Garbhagriha is very simple, very plain. The pillars are no ornamentation, no designs, nothing. Just you come here and you feel that you are before the God. Your dedication and devotion is there for the God only. Next. The sculptural art is another very interesting in Kandariya Mahadev. We all know the exterior faces. There are elaborately carved sculptures. Not a single decimal point is left. Gods and goddesses are there. Musicians are there. Apsaras are there. Nymphs are there. They all are very well depicted. It seems there is life in them. The huge pillars of the halls have architectural features of the vine and scroll motif. In the corners of the hall, there are insets which are carved on the surface with incised patterns. There are presence of erotica sculpture here in Kandariya. Very little. Next. Again, the same sculptures which we are seeing here. I think these are some erotic sculptures, perhaps. Next. Vaman Temple. Vaman Temple, known as Javari Temple, that has also some differences which we find here from the Kandarya and Lakshman Temple. So differences what we find here is the Jagati is not that big. Jagati has become now down, but the plinth has increased. The plinth is not like Kandarya and Javari. So these are the changes also we are finding. This comes to the later period. Next. Chaturbhuj is another later period. Here in Chaturbhuj we find total changes about the plinth and as well as the inside portions. Next. Adina Temple. This Adina Temple is a very plain temple. It has got not much ornamentation and it is of the later period. But this is dedicated to Jain Tirthankar. So it is known as the Jain Temple. We have Jain sculptures outside in the exterior. Not much, very little of the Jain Tirthankars. Next. Parshanath is again, it is in the eastern group, the Jain temple. Parshanath's architecture and Adinath's architecture are different, although they are of the Jain religion. Parshanath seems to be of the earlier phase when this Kandarya was being built. So it has got the massiveness, magnificency, whereas Adinath has not that magnificency. Next. There's some Jain sculptures, some Jain inscriptions in old Devanagari. We have here. Next. Here we are coming to that new site which I have discovered, Bija Mandal. This is after the excavation. We could not go down this. That is, again, when I see, I feel because of paucity of time, I could not go to the bedrock. I should have gone to that level also. Because here, when we were digging to these places, we got some stray potteries also. Those potteries were of the later Gupta period or Gupta period, redware. Next. This is the mound which in first instance when we were going, the vegetational photo is not there. It was thickly vegetated and we saw the shivling from the distance. Only shivling was visible. Rest remaining other parts were thickly vegetated and was full with all trees and plants and etc. and etc. Next. First season of excavation, which revealed the platform of the brick structure. The platform was built of brick and mud mortar without any filling. There we suspect some Buddhist influence. The presence of architectural fragments in the four corner and center of the platform reveals presence of Panchayatan form of temple. That was clear that it was a Panchayatan. In one of the subsidiary shrine dedicated to Mahishmardani Vaman image, door jamb bearing Yamuna figure, decorative pillars with floral motifs and Ghata Pallava design was also unearthed. Next. This is all first season excavation. All architectural parts and fragments we have collected in our yard, little near to the monument. And we are just now working at it. We studied what are these things. Here we got Vishnu, here we got Kirtimukha, where Vishnu had, and very significant. It is of the Chandela period, all were of the Chandela period. Next. This is second season excavation we did in 2000, and here also we started from the top, and from the top we started cleaning. The mound is of 7.5 meter height and 40 meter in length. The mound was encased in dressed stones. There was a encaser of the dressed stones, the broken marble yoni patta with marble Shiva Linga situated at the mount was later established by Maharaja Pratap Singh. This Shivalinga is a later addition which Maharaja Pratap Singh fixed it there in 19th century. It was not the time of the temples. Next. It is even longer than the largest temple of Khajuraho. As I told you, Kandaria Mahadev temple was in 30 meter in length and 19.24 meter in width. Bijamandal temple is 34.60 meter in length and 20 meter in width. So it's a colossal number of architectural edifices was found here. It appears that the temple was an incomplete dream. At times, my article has come in many of the journals where I mentioned that this was a training center also. This is one of the assumptions which I have given. Okay, this was a place where artisans used to, because we have got many chips, many waste materials also here. So why these waste materials were kept here? So sometimes I feel that this was that thing. The identification of temple was done by Devangana Desai as this to be the Vidyanath temple built by the Gahapati Kokila. As I told you, the inscription also mentions about it. Next. Now you see from the distance, it looks as if here they have followed complete temple architecturals, all designs, whatever was mentioned in the temple architecture for the plinth portion. So where is the superstructure? Whether superstructure was not built or it was built, then where are those architectural fragments of the superstructure? We are not getting much part of the shikhara or the other remains of the temples. Next. Again, from this temple you see, when you see the close-up, you will find that beautiful architectural work has been done for the plinth portion. Plinth portion was built, completely it was built. And it had a very fine finish, very well built. Next. Same view of the plinth portion. Next. The sculptures. We have some Amaris sculptures also. We have one beautiful Saraswati sculpture also. But that Saraswati sculpture was so nice that in Festival of India, that sculpture was taken to Paris. Although it was incomplete. It was not the complete sculpture. I don't think in the PPT we have that sculpture. Next. In the sculptural remains and architectural fragments. So what is very important that this is one of the very major contribution. This excavation has given a new history to the Khajuraho Chandela art, Chandela era, by its discovery, especially of the Jagati portion, the intact portion which we have found, a new history of Khajuraho Chandela monuments have been introduced after this excavation. Next. And here at the end, before the excavation, it was believed only Hindu and Jain believers thrived at Khajuraho. But the Bijamandal temple indicates presence of Buddhist sect also. That is very important. Nowhere in Khajuraho till now any evidence of Buddhism was found. So this excavation gave evidence of Buddhist sect also. The presence of largest temple yet discovered is also significant. The presence of pre-Chandela period is also remarkable as it gives a rare glimpse to the artistic and architectural evolution of the Khajuraho group of temples. Next. So my dear friends, I don't know how far I have been able to make you understand about this Chandela art. I was posted there in 1999, 2001, 2002. After that, I was posted in various other circles of the country. But during my short span of stay at Khajuraho. This was my work. I have written one book also on my excavations, and that book we published 2,000 copies. All are sold out. So Amejan is requesting me to give the permission for the second copy also. So here we end the Chandela Temple and the Khajuraho newly discovered temple. Thank you very much, and thanks to this Tamil Heritage Trust for giving me this stage to speak and interact with you. Thank you personally to Professor Babu for his very liberal and very kind attitude towards me and inviting me here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I have a few questions, very brief, given we'll have about at least 10 minutes left, so we can take it to you. You come from a, we have had history professors, experts talking to us. You come from a strong archaeological experience with excavations. One of the questions that one of the reader asked, one of the viewer asked, Subramanian Kannan, are there any evidences of stones for the temple sourced from nearby Rane Falls for building the Khajuraho group of monuments?
Yeah, I very good question. Actually, I was when I was working there, I was thinking, what was the query from where they have brought these stones? And that query must be definitely nearby. It won't be very far. About Rane Falls, I had gone to Rane Falls to check. That query was not used. They have not used. We searched the query of this sandstone. We have found it at Panna. In Panna area, there are many queries of this stone, and all the stones were brought from Panna area, which is about 40 kilometers, 35 kilometers from Khajuraho.
Okay. There's a question from Kishore. How do we conclude the presence of Buddhist sect when we find a Shivaling in the Bijamandal temple?
I think, my dear friend, I told you that Shivalinga was installed in 19th century, late 19th century, by the king of that place. Even the genealogy of the king is still going on there. Still some persons say that they are from that family only. So that king must have installed that Shivling in 19th century, whereas we are getting Buddhist evidences of the quite early phase. So there is no correlation between Shivlinga and the Buddhist sect. They are all of the different times.
Okay. Then there is a sort of a related question, let's say from Kumud Kanikar, one of our speakers. She spoke yesterday. Was the legendary Emerald Linga of the Bijamandal ever found?
No, we couldn't get it.
Okay. So, back to the Khajuraho group. One of the, not just the Kandaria Mahadeva or a Lakshmana Temple, a whole bunch of temples there have excelled in that Shekari form of architecture. In your experience, is there anywhere else, forget about the size, the height, etc., something similar to the same degree of finesse and sophistication of the the stacked shikara forms of temple available in the larger North Indian space? Anywhere else, anywhere close to this that you can say in terms of quality?
No. Even we can say that the Khajuraho Chandel temples were the only area wherein the Chandel rulers have used this kind of magnificency and this kind of artistic architecture. I don't think nearby I have any this kind of monument. Even I have traveled all over the Madhya Pradesh, and those constructions are different, like Pratihara construction, Parmara construction, Bhumija style. They all are totally different than this Chandela architecture. So I don't think we have found anywhere that.
And why? I mean, what is the reason?
This is a very good question. Very good question. I tell you, my dear, if you are the director of any institution, your mind is very different and you work with some different mind. And then the next director comes. Like, nobody can become Professor Babu. Professor Babu has got his own inclination to make. He told me very first day, I am not an archaeologist, sir. I am not an historian, sir. But look, archaeologists and historian won't be able to do this kind of work, what he is doing. So what I feel, Yashovarman was one of the very eminent ruler of that time. And his mind was very proactive and he gave some thoughts to it while getting this construction. It could not be spread all over the area, even in nearby area. If you go to Chhatarpur, if you go to Sagar, the monuments of Chhatarpur and Sagar and Panna, even in Rewa, are quite different than the Khajuraho temples.
Okay. The next question is, that there's so much of emphasis on the architectural element. In terms of sculptures, I personally feel, I've visited there, I've, there is a bit on the lower side. I mean, relatively speaking, I'm not for a minute saying the sculptures are not good, but the amount of emphasis that had gone into the architectural aspect, it somehow felt that, they had not concentrated as much on the sculpture side. I mean, just my humble opinion. I mean, I want to.
No, I will not agree with you wholeheartedly, but you are right also that we could have given more emphasis on sculptures also, because sculptures are marvelous. Sculptures are really, like you see in Hoysala temples, sculptures are given more importance than the architecture. Here it is different. Here the architecture is given more importance than the sculpture. But I don't deny this also, that if you compare sculpture and architecture, you won't be able to give 1.1% marks less to them. Both are equally important. Both needs to be given full emphasis.
Sir, on the Varaha temple, though it's technically more a mandapa, was that Varaha actually was meant for that place, or it was found elsewhere and brought here and placed in that mandapa?
Yeah, there are two versions also. The record says that it was placed there. It was not its original place. But there are another record also, which says that there was a plan to construct a very big Vishnu temple over here. So before that, they thought, let this Varaha be erected and they should be installed. So no conclusion we have got about this so far.
Again, with my limited understanding,
no.
Kinds of Varaha, the zoomorphic Varaha, which is so unique to the Madhya Pradesh region, be it in Iran or here or in some of the other places, or let's say even from the early Gupta era, the Udayagiri cave one, were they really meant for the sanctum of a temple? Because it's the sanctum, the one to worship in the sanctum is a more traditional murti as per various Agama Shastras. And this, for example, given the fact that in Iran it is right in the middle of nowhere, not that there is a superstructure over it, or even this one placed in a mandapa, I'm just wondering what is the role of this again? Since you would have seen all of them.
No, I've got your point, but I won't agree with you that this was meant to be installed in the sanctum. Sanctum, nobody will, nowhere we have found in the history or any of the temples that these, like Garuda, like Ganesha, like Nandi, they are not meant for sanctum. They are only meant for the either Sabha Mandapa, outside Garbhagriha.
Okay.
They will be always installed outside the Garbhagriha as per the myth and as per the examples which we are getting all over the country. You won't find any Varaha in any of the Garbhagriha of the temple. I have not heard it. If you have seen it, kindly enlighten me.
In the form of a Varaha Murti, as a Varaha Murti,
Murti you will find it.
Not in this kind of a Varaha.
In this form, you will not find it. In this form, usually they are kept outside the sanctum.
Okay. Again, one really last point about the Kandariya Mahadev temple. Though there are, equally good temples on either side of it, as you pointed out, Kandariya Mahadev is a sort of a standout. It's an absolute, there is, you can't really compare it to anything else. Now, in terms of, was there any restoration required? I mean, we can see that there are some patchworks that were done. So some pieces might have fallen down. So what kind of a restoration was done?
You see, it's a very relevant question. What is very important at the moment to restore these Khajuraho temples. During my tenure as head of the circle, we restored one of the subsidiary shrine. Just next to Kandariya. That whole shrine, what we did, we dismantled it. And after dismantling, we again refixed it. So even in Kandariya, there are 2 cracks. And that cracks, I am talking you 20 years back. Whenever any friend of mine meets me, I ask him, what have you done to that crack of Kandariya Mahadev? I should not speak on this place, government will take action on me, but seepage has started in Garbhagriha of Kandariya. How? We have to check that. We need a very strong conservation of these monuments. And as you know very well, that water and vegetation and baits, these 3 things are the enemy of this kind of monuments. Khajuraho is having maximum baits. If you go to, our conservation staff had to fight with the baits. What these baits will do, they will go outside, they will bring some small insect plants and they will sit on that cracks and they will put it. So these baits will bring vegetation and the vegetational part will damage our monument like anything. Rainwaters, if you don't check up soon after the rain, that small waters will go in that crack. And it will damage for the whole year. So Kandariya and other monuments in Khajuraho has got this kind of problem. And whosoever is the head of that zone, I usually ask them, what are you going to do? Of course, they do it. I don't say they are not doing, but they have to make a big master plan for that. Otherwise, at one time, we may lose this kind of
Correct. That's our worry, because this being such a complex structure.
I agree with you. It's a very relevant.
The level of conservation required has to be tremendous.
Tremendous, in a well-planned manner.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. It was fascinating. You've been fortunate. You have been fortunate to be there for a long time. Some of us have only visited maybe for a day, or maximum we have been there for 2 days, and we could still visualize the entire set of monuments and the size and the scope of what the medieval Chandela kings had put together there. Just outstanding architecture of a very unique form. And thank you for bringing all of that to us, to reminisce all of that and bring your experience into the narration. Thank you. Let me invite Kishore to thank and then close the proceedings for the day.
Sure. Thank you, Badri. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Fascinating lecture, and for some of us at Tamil Heritage, brought back memories of a very brief trip that we made to Khajuraho more than 2 years ago. Along with that, you brought in a lot of your experience at the field, with archaeology and excavation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, friends, with that, we come to the conclusion of this morning's program. Like we said earlier, we have 4 lectures today, and we will meet again this evening at 6 p.m. where Dr. Sanjay Acharya will talk us through the Eastern Gangas and Kalinga architecture. Followed by that, we will have a lecture by Dr. Shrikant Ganveer on the Malwa, the Parmaras of Malwa and the Bhumija temples that they built. Thank you very much. Please join us at 6 p.m. this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.